one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item is public participation. And I just wanted to mention there are a couple items off the agenda, so if you're here to speak about them, we're not going to accept the donation for the police motorcycles. We don't have a presentation by Chagrin Valley Engineers. That'll be at the 9/24 meeting. We took off the motion for John Rice to attend the zoning hearing board with the Radnor Fire Company on the cell tower. They're going to the November meeting, so we'll see what happens there. And we're not going to have the BT settlement under finance and audit. So if you're here for those items, we will not be discussing those this evening, unless you want to discuss them in public comment. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Spengler. As most of the commissioners know, 3 residents of Garrett Hill were successfully received a WREN grant from the League of Women Voters. That's Water Resource Education Network. I'm very pleased to announce that on the 30th of September, which is a Sunday afternoon, the Eagles game is not till 8 o'clock at night, there will be a meeting in this room, a panel discussion on rain gardens. What are they? Why should people have them, and how do you do them? The speakers will be Marissa Barletta of Garrett Hill, who's a consultant to the Philadelphia Water Department, talking about how when neighbors work together using rain gardens and rain barrels, they can literally begin to ameliorate stormwater issues. John Neistat of the Delaware River Keeper is going to speak. Rob Traver of Villanova University is going to speak. And an Eagle Scout from the Bryn Mawr troop is going to announce his Eagle Project, which is putting in a demonstration garden at Macrone Park. So that's the 30th of September, 2 o'clock in this room. The other thing I'd like to announce to you is that the Skunk Hollow Garden, we donated, as I told you before, to Phil Abundance for Delaware County, and we finished it up last week, and we donated an equivalent of $1,355 for Delaware residents who need fresh food. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to do a shout out to Mary Coe and to Betty Mackey, who led that effort, because it turned out to be a lot of work.
Was that Delaware County or Delaware State?
Delaware County.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi, members of the commission. My name is Anthony Gallia, and I'm a resident of Radnor Township. I live in the neighborhood of Trianon. I'm here actually on behalf of a couple of business owners who have their businesses on Conestoga Road, in particular between 320 and Radnor-Chester Road. And probably as many of you know from driving down that road, there's significant construction being undertaken on that section of the road, which has caused some significant hardships to these relatively small businesses, with the road being shut down pretty much between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., sometimes longer, including today. The business owners are obviously concerned with regard to the project, which I understand has been delayed, and are, number one, wondering if there's anything that can be done, whether there's redress through Aqua, or whether Radnor can put some pressure on the utility with regard to this project to get it done, or whether there's some compensation that can be made to these businesses for the loss that they've suffered. In some cases, it's about 50% per month. And also, we also understand that there's going to be another project beginning on Radnor-Chester Road. We're not sure what the timing of that is, and obviously we're concerned that the two projects, to the extent they overlap, could be crippling to these businesses. So I just want to bring that up. I don't know whether anything's been done. I'm not sure whether anything can be done, but would like to flag that issue for the commission for any consideration that can be had for these small businesses that are obviously good businesses, and we like them here in the township, and they're providing jobs and taxes. So,
well, we've been working on this full time, and I'll let Steve address all the things he's tried to do and tried to accomplish and what he can accomplish.
All right, well, great. And if anything I can do, Steve, to help.
Both projects, the Pico project on Radnor-Chester Road and the Aqua Pennsylvania project on Conestoga Road, are administered through the Department of Transportation. They're both PennDOT projects, so we have little say in what can be done. 2 Fridays ago at the District 60 PennDOT offices, I met with Pico, Aqua, and PennDOT to try to make sure that Radnor-Chester Road would not be closed while all this took place. That was a huge concern. The police department was in concurrence, and I represented that thought. At that time, Aqua Pennsylvania thought they would be done, and they are not. And I've had trouble getting hold of them. I did talk to the Aqua Pennsylvania representative. He thinks that they will be finished by this Thursday. Now, that was before they were out there working at 6 o'clock tonight, so I don't know how valid that still is. They're obviously having problems out there of some sort getting this work done. That still means the paving restoration has to take place. That only goes down slightly east of Chalmont towards Radnor Chester Road. They're looking at doing that at night, but he was not able to tell me for sure if that would occur. Today, the signs are up for Radnor Chester Road to be closed, but there was no work taking place. So I don't know why that occurred, and Aqua did not know either. But PECO said they would wait, if it was within reason, to hold back on their work until Aqua was out of there. And after speaking to Aqua today, I believe PECO will hold off this week to let them get out of there. Why the signs are up as you approached Radnor Chester from Route 30, I have not been able to obtain an answer. Aqua Pennsylvania knows that they need to get out of the way because there's also a paving project by PennDOT. They want to pave Conestoga Road, and they need to be off it for that to occur. And since PennDOT's contractor is on Bryn Mawr Avenue, I know they're going to be anxious to come to Conestoga Road. If all goes well, per Aqua Pennsylvania, they will be done the pipe work, which is the work that's botching up traffic during the day, by Thursday, with paving restoration possibly taking place at night, or it may take a few days to actually finish that. If all goes according to their plans, Radnor Chester Road will be open tomorrow, okay? Conestoga Road will still be being worked on for the next 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and hopefully they will be out of there before PECO, who really wanted to start today, is going to hold off until next week. That's what I got as of about 4:45 tonight on that project. Okay. So we've been working. I went to PennDOT on this because they administer the contracts, and they were very helpful because they saw the bottleneck that this was caused, and they came up with some good ideas for PECO to try to let them start some work without totally closing the road. So in order to keep PECO on schedule, if push came to shove, they could start work on Radnor Chester, but they could keep just one lane open, which would still allow traffic to pass, and it would still take place in that 9 to 3 period.
Okay. Well, thank you for the.
That's what I have so far.
I've been trying to get in touch with Aqua. I haven't had too much success myself, but I appreciate the members of the commission's time.
Mr. Chairman,
thanks very much.
If I may, just to add to that, and I think Steve's been very politically correct, it's been a nightmare not only for these businesses here of how poorly that Aqua has handled it, but even worse is I think PennDOT's arrogance in basically snubbing not only these business owners, but I think the community as a whole. Because when that condition of that road and how horrible that condition of that road is, and Steve and I have spoken many, many times on that, in PennDOT, who I don't think has even come out to ride that road, when you see how horrible the condition of that road is, to say that that's acceptable is ridiculous at best. So if you are legal representation representing those, I think you should push the issue about compensation for that. I know the police department has been out there constantly, where we have been notified at times where they have shut the entire road down, where there's been no access to those businesses at all. And then we've had to go out, and how many police officer hours have we had to spend with that? I think that this is a complete disregard of PennDOT for the township. Aqua, we have had problems for the last year based on how the horrible job they have done here in the township. PECO was going to come on, and I think they've backed their schedule off as well to allow this, but we know Radnor Chester Road is going to be shut down as they do work there. So I think this would be something, if the board would allow, that we would support whatever efforts you take on this, because it is unacceptable. At some point, it's got to stop. Because, again, with the number of PennDOT roads throughout this township, and the way this has been handled has been horrible.
Yeah,
and I think that goes back to Aqua.
And, just so you know, I'm actually a partner with the law firm of Dwayne Morris, and not only are these individuals my friends, but I intend to attempt to seek some redress, because as I mentioned, the businesses are suffering. So if anybody's got information in terms of contacts or want me to pursue avenues, I would not be offended for any advice or suggestions on which roads to go down. No pun intended. And I will certainly do that. So thank you again.
I thank you. Sure.
My name's Jim Green. I'm
You got to come to the mic.
Hi, my name's Jim Green. I'm the owner of Ithan Food Market. And my only question is to the township, from what I hear through the grapevine, if it works anyway along them lines, township will not let night work happen. Would you please explain to me why night work cannot happen when it's already been done at night?
I've never told Aqua Pennsylvania that they couldn't work at night. As a matter of fact, at that meeting I mentioned at the District 60 offices, that was brought up specifically if they could do their paving restoration at night. And that's something that Aqua has not told us whether they are going to be able to do that or not. The township would fully support any of that work taking place at night to relieve the traffic, but there has been no...
Sorry, you got to be at the mic, sir, if you're going to talk.
Yeah, I'll be very explicit. The township has never told them they could not work at night on Conestoga Road doing that paving restoration.
The foreman told me wrong. Then he said he wanted to do it at night and you turned him down.
Number one, we don't even control the permit. The permit is
I know.
controlled by PennDOT, so we wouldn't have the ability to say that, but we supported them getting their restoration done at night so they could get out of everybody's hair.
I'll take it up with my legal counsel. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And Bob, I would just mention, I mean, I've been an elected official for a long time. We always had a good relationship with PennDOT. So I don't know what happened over the last 5 or 6 years, but maybe it's time that we have the 3 state representatives come in and meet with you and your staff to discuss these issues.
We would love to be able to do that, and as an example of that, they can just look at the interchange there of how a nice
No, I
job they do
understand
of
the
cutting the
interchange and
grass.
send a letter to governor and all that, but all I'm saying, we have 3 state representatives, and and the state senator, we ought to have those 4 individuals come in and meet with you and your staff to discuss how we can have better relationship and cooperation with PennDOT, and they can put the pressure on.
Be more than happy to. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, public participation? I want to give a notice of an executive session preceding this Board of Commissioners meeting on September 10th, where personnel and litigation was discussed, and all commissioners were present. Commissioner Higgins came a little late, but he was there at the end. So that's that notice. And now I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting for August 20th, 2012.
I move to approve the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting for August 20th, 2012.
Second.
Second? Wow. Any commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0.
That was a really short meeting. Thanks, Bill.
The Wayne Business District representatives, Wayne Business Fall Festival announcement.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you're not going to be busy on Sunday, this Sunday, September 16th, because from 1 to 5 p.m. we have our 20th annual Radnor Fall Festival on North Wayne Avenue in downtown Wayne. It's free to come to the event, and then you can pay for food and rides and games for the kids. Face painting, magicians, music, dancing, the top dog contest, so bring your dog and put them in the top dog contest.
Costumed and all.
Costumes, and food, and what else? 2 local authors we have signing books and selling books.
Over 70 vendors.
Yes, we have more vendors and more sponsors than we've ever
We have
had
to turn
before,
people
so,
away.
yeah.
It's that popular.
Yeah, so we just want, now we just need the attendees. So everyone come out September 16th, and I remember I see some of you guys every year, so it would be great if you could come out.
We'll be there.
Thank
Very
you.
good. And also next Thursday, the 20th, we have our own Commissioner Bill Spengler is going to be our speaker at the Wayne Business Association. Where'd he go? There he is. There he is, right there on our newsletter. Going out to our 250 members. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have a certificate, a recognition and achievement for the Wayne Business Association, so if you stand here for a second, you're not allowed to leave. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. But we want to recognize the achievement of you for the 20th anniversary of the Radnor Fall Festival. It's great.
Oh my gosh.
It's great for our community, and we appreciate it. So on behalf of the Radnor Township, I'd like to present this to the Wayne Business District. Okay?
Excellent.
All right, thank you. Keep going.
Thank you.
Next, we have a certificate of appreciation to the Radnor Township School District. Your name is?
Joe Percetti.
Hi, Joe. I just want to read this so everyone explains why we're giving you a certificate of appreciation, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. The Radnor Township School District has partnered with Radnor Township with a mutual goal of assisting the township in providing public safety to the Radnor community. In the month of July 2012, a public safety need developed, and Radnor Township needed to count on the Radnor School District to assist in the problem. The Radnor Township School District, without hesitation, did partner together with the township and enabled us to have a response plan should the need arise at a moment's notice. Fortunately, for all involved, the plan was not needed to be activated. So be it known that the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners commends the Radnor Township School District and further acknowledges their role in assisting with public safety of Radnor Township. Thank you very much on behalf of the Board of Commissioners. Do you want to say anything? Or?
Certainly. My name is Joe Perchetti. I'm the head of security for Radnor Township School District. First off, thank you very much, Commissioners. It continues to be a privilege and an honor to support this township, fine business community, the township building, as well as the school community. Thank you very much.
We have a certificate of appreciation for the Giant Food Stores. Hi, how are you? Tell everybody who you are.
Richard Smith, store manager.
Okay, thank you. Whereas this certificate of appreciation is presented to Giant Food Stores for their generous donation of $500 to be used for juvenile fingerprint machine to be used by the Radnor Police Department. Radnor Township also acknowledges Giant's new store opening in Wayne and the positive impact it makes on our entire community. Be it known that the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners recognizes the community partnership with the Giant Food Stores and their generous donation to better serve the Township of Radnor.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Radnor Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
In my younger years, I used to manage Acme Markets, so I know your business. What's that? We don't have any of those. There's a beautiful one in Bryn Mawr. I used to manage Bryn Mawr. It's a beautiful store. Anybody? Not anything at Giant Food. Shop Giant Food. I'm sorry. Giant Food's in my ward. I shouldn't even mention that. I'm sorry. I get carried away sometime. When I go off script, I'm terrible. So you better keep me on script at that meeting of the Wayne Business District. Now we'd like to have recognition of years of service. I got Ellen McDevitt, 40-plus years. Ellen, would you like to come forward? You don't want to come forward? I'll come to you. Ellen, we appreciate your 40 years of service, and in those 40 years, you've been giving me advice almost every time I see you, so I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service to
Thank
Radnor
you.
Township and our finance department. You've done a tremendous
Okay.
job.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay,
This
on
is
behalf-
not my name.
Oh, that's not your name.
That's my
Presented
name.
to Ellen McDevitt. I thought you were Emma.
No.
In recognition of over 40 years of dedicated service.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Billy.
much. Appreciate it. Good to see you. And we have James Dungy. All right, James. James Dungy for 40 years of dedicated service in public works. We appreciate it very much. Thank you for your
very much.
service.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'd like to have a motion to authorize the waiver of fees for Radnor Page.
So moved.
Second.
What's your comment?
Yeah, is anybody here from this organization? I'd like to know if they're in any way consultants and provide paid services.
I believe we forwarded some information to the board. They are not.
Okay.
Any public comment? All those in favor of the waiver of fees, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, I'd like to have a motion to approve the Country Day School of the Sacred Heart to hold the third annual Miss Pat 5K on Saturday.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
Diane, do you mind staying till the finance discussion comes up? Okay, because I'd like to get your perspective on the change in the.
All right.
Bye,
Well,
Sam.
Diane, why don't you let him ask your question now? We're not going to hold you. Go ahead. Ask her the question.
My question, my question is that, we have here later in the agenda the proposal to change the mercantile tax year and the business privilege tax year. And I think intuitively it makes sense to me. Intuitively, I think for the businesses it probably makes sense, but I haven't heard anybody from the businesses say they're supportive of one way or another. And then I just want to get a sense of if you've worked with Bill and Bob on some kind of communication plan to make sure that the members of the Wayne Business Association get this communicated to them in a timely manner so that they can act upon it and not suffer any adverse consequences.
They're all good points. I only found out about it today, and yes, Bob and Bill did communicate that to me today, and I did get information that I can e-blast to our members, which I was going to do tomorrow. So I wasn't sure what was going to be done today. Is everybody voting for it to pass? Is that the program? And
Tonight's
it's just to change the time frame, correct? They're not increasing the rate or anything.
No, and it actually would more align it with your regular taxes.
Yeah.
As opposed
yeah.
to.
See, I
so-
didn't see any downside to that as long
I
as
mean,
that's
me either.
it.
I just want to get the perspective of the people who actually
Right.
have to live it.
No, I don't think anybody else knows about it, which is something else I was going to talk to the township employees about. It is notifying the businesses and things that affect them, much like the outdoor dining changes that are happening. If I didn't hear from Clint Stennebeck that was happening, they wouldn't have known. So
Well, most of
there's
the
gotta be better
restaurants that belong to the
communication.
association have been calling us, and they know about it because they're pushing to get
Well,
it done.
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
get the word out.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Is that it?
that's it. Thank you. All right, eight's off the agenda. A consideration appointment to the Shade Tree Commission. John,
I'll move to appoint Jack Mellerick.
do I have a second? Comment? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Chagrin, they're going to be here at our next meeting. And we have committee reports, community development, Don.
Jim, do you want to take item A? Jim Higgins?
Yep.
Would it be okay if our item was moved down? Our attorney is caught in traffic and is on his way here now for choice A. If we
Sure.
could- Thank you very much.
Just like raise your hand, let me know when he gets here, and I'll get it back on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right. All right. The next item is removed from the agenda. And so we're note C, Don.
Okay. So, John Rice, for this, you just a motion to initiate the process. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Don.
For item C on page 2, you're looking for a motion to initiate the process,
Correct.
correct? Okay. Does anybody want information on it from John before we?
No, but I'd like to make a recommendation that in addition to sending this to planning, we also send it to the Comprehensive Plan Implement Committee to review it specifically in the context of the comprehensive plan.
That seems reasonable to me. Okay, so I'll make a motion that we forward this request for Biomed to amend Chapter 280, and that part of the process includes sending this to the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee.
I just want to make sure that the motion includes the guidance that their analysis will be for how this proposed ordinance comports with the vision in our comp plan, so that they're taking more of a global
Yes.
analysis of it.
Yes.
All right, you made the motion, and who seconded it?
Second.
All right, any other, wait, raise your hand, who seconded it? John?
John can have it.
John, okay. Any other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0. Public Works and Engineering?
The first item is a caucus matter involving C.F. Holloway III and Company. There would be no voting on this tonight. It's informational. It would be the consolidation of two lots into one at 229 and 255 West Wayne Avenue in Wayne. We have an existing retail store to remain as a commercial building, outbuildings to be demolished, and to construct 6 new townhouse units with new parking and access driveways. I believe the applicant and council are here.
I'm trying, John. It's a long road for me. Good evening. Dave Falcone, Saul Ewing for CF Holloway. As Commissioner Higgins was explaining, that we are here for our caucus tonight on the project over at the Adelberger site, which is located along West Wayne Avenue. It's actually two different addresses there, 229 and 255. The project, as it was described, no screen, but it's we are proposing, aside from combining two lots back here, the combination has nothing to do with the front parcel, the split zone. It has to do with a small parcel located in the rear that we're combining in the back in the R district. We're proposing 6 townhouses. We're also proposing to keep the existing commercial building, but to reduce the size. In reducing that size, we're able to bring what is presently non-conforming parking into conformity with the township ordinance. We're also able to gain additional separation between the residential and the commercial piece. That was important to the Planning Commission. We went through 3 different meetings with the Planning Commission to try and get what we believe was an acceptable plan to both parties. This plan has changed a lot through those meetings, and we've finally arrived at something we think is a great use for this property. But one of the main comments from the Planning Commission was originally we had our buildings much closer. They wanted to see a greater separation. We've been able to show it up to 16 and a half feet, and that was a good thing. One of the waivers that we requested from the Planning Commission that they approved had to do with the driveway coming into the site. The ordinance requires a 25-foot wide driveway. We offered to provide that 25 feet. However, early on in the process with the Planning Commission, it was discussed whether 25 feet or 20 feet would be more appropriate for this use. The Planning Commission agreed by a majority of the Planning Commission that 20 feet was a better use here. That does a couple of things. It keeps our impervious cover lower, though we are in compliance either way, and it also removes the inclination of visitors to the site to perhaps park along this street to keep it free for access. We thought it was a more appropriate driveway. This is serving a residential piece, 20 feet. Again, we all were in agreement that it was more appropriate. We also have a waiver that we're requesting with respect to the right-of-way out front. The township ordinance requires that there be additional right-of-way granted here. We're showing what's existing today. There was a fair amount of discussion back and forth with the township on this point. I know that some folks in township staff believe we should have a wider right-of-way. We did attempt to resolve this through a meeting with township staff, came to some fair resolution, though it's not agreed upon. I know Mr. Mersini feels strongly about the right-of-way, but we did meet and try and accommodate all the parties. We've agreed to provide an easement to the township to make up the additional right-of-way. There are no other properties surrounding this intersection or really anywhere along Conestoga in this vicinity that have the additional right-of-way. In fact, the property across the street could not grant that right-of-way and still maintain its existing building. So given the existing conditions around, we would be the only property granting the additional right-of-way. We've also contacted PennDOT. We said we would to see if this was anywhere in their long-term plans, an expansion here, and they have agreed it is not. Mr. Fiorello and his company spoke to them, so he can offer that testimony as well. That's kind of the general overview of the project as it stands right now. Happy to answer any questions, but most importantly, we have our architect with us tonight. He can describe exactly what the buildings are going to look like. We've brought those plans. I have Mr. Fiorello here, who's our engineer, and he can certainly address any questions from an engineering perspective.
Dave, am I understanding it correctly that there's no longer any entrance on Conestoga, that the entrance to the entire property is now on West Wayne?
That's correct. There used to be an entrance kind of right in the middle of the intersection. I know that was kind of a problem entrance. There was also an entrance back off of Conestoga. We've gotten rid of both of those entrances, and we're providing one entrance here.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
can you describe the planned office building, what the use is going to be? I mean, is it going to be retail on the first floor, office on the second, or do you have any idea?
It's going to stay as it is now. Our hope it's going to stay a florist.
Okay.
That's the hope. We're shrinking the size, but our intended goal is to keep an existing florist there. I don't even believe
How are you
there's-
shrinking the size? By lopping off part of the building?
Right. So as the building has aged, there's been expansions. There's been greenhouses added. The core building, and Kath might be able to speak more appropriately to this, though. Towards the back, there was some stairwells. There were greenhouses. We're getting rid of those. They're not used. We're working with the Adelbergers in this design. There was a stairwell going down into a basement that really led to nowhere because it led to a concrete wall because there were other access points from inside the building. There was a side portion which was added after the original construction. There was a fire, and that's being removed. We're getting back to more of a core building. Do we have a...
So they're going to remain there, what, as tenants?
There'll be a florist there as tenants, yes.
As tenants. And is there a second story on that building?
I don't believe there's a
No.
second story, no. And it'll stay a one story.
Okay.
We're not really proposing no expansion of that building whatsoever, only
But
construction.
the parking lot will all be new.
The parking lot, what we have here is an existing conditions plan. The parking right now is in the same area we're showing it. It's unstriped, but we're showing striped parking, and we're also bringing the parking this way to remove this piece back here. This impervious that's existing in this driveway to the back will be removed. The parking will be shown here in the driveway access instead of coming back here. We'll now
And
take
why are you doing that, to change the impervious? Or?
to change the impervious calculations because of where the zoning line is. The split zone comes kind of through the commercial piece and then down. So in order to make the rear piece compliant and the front piece compliant, we've shifted the parking as well as to bring this parking into conformity. Because of the way the split use is, this parking will all serve the commercial piece and will exist entirely on the commercial piece of the property. There'll be
And
no...
Have you given any consideration to using any kind of pervious parking surface, or not just plain old asphalt? I mean, is it asphalt now or is it gravel?
Right now, the surface is asphalt. Whether we go with gravel or some type of a more porous material, your ordinance really doesn't differentiate between a gravelly type
Right.
material and asphalt in terms of stormwater runoff and impervious cover. So we're limiting the amount of impervious that we can to the parking areas in the building itself. One of the things that the staff has asked for is some type of a stabilized area in here for fire vehicles to come in and access the site. That we'll be working with the township engineer as part of our final plans to come up with a material that will support the weight of an emergency vehicle, but still allow water to pass through it. So it will more or less look as grass. It would be sort of a reinforced turf material. Try to maintain the look of the grass and not confuse it with the look of asphalt or anything like that.
Okay. My next question is really for Steve Norsini. Can you articulate for us what the importance of the right-of-way is?
Thank you, Commissioner. My only thought was, in Public Works, we're always dealing with rights-of-ways and utilities and the intersection. With the development of this property, the thought being that perhaps the other corners would become more attractive for redevelopment as time went on. And whether it be in the near future or far future, the possibility exists that we may have to reconfigure that intersection. I can't say that we would. It would be a possibility. If that were to occur and that right-of-way were made available to us, there would not be an exposure to the township for cost. We would be able to use that ground without having to pay for it. And it's in our ordinance. So my thought was build to what's in the ordinance as opposed to building beyond that. The counsel for the applicant has offered an easement. To be honest, an easement really does not meet the need as right-of-way. We could put a pipe through the easement and restore the parking lot, and that would be greatly appreciated if we ever needed to do that. But it would not allow us to perhaps have a turning lane there. Again, not saying that we definitely would need that. It's just some insurance for the future regarding that intersection.
Right, and I, think in terms more of not turning lanes, but, you know, in our comprehensive plan, we call for bike lanes, we call for, you know, better pedestrian lanes, so, yeah, I mean, maybe you don't have quite the space needs for those, but I can see your desire to keep that as an option.
So either someone from your staff, could you talk a little bit about efforts that you took to move the parking out of the right-of-way and why you believe, why you're here for the waiver instead of a design that incorporates or moves the parking rather?
We did. So at our last planning commission, actually 2 planning commission meetings ago, the point was brought up, show us a plan, one maybe that would be a single-use plan and one that maybe you wouldn't need a waiver from. So we went back and did a very preliminary sketch plan that showed 9 townhomes. And that allowed us to grant the full, and we have that plan, that allowed us to grant the full right-of-way and did not cause any issues from that perspective, from an ordinance perspective. That plan was not, the neighbors did not feel that plan was an appropriate use for this site. There was one neighbor in particular that came out, had vocal opposition to it. Kaz has met with the neighbors, met with them a while ago to discuss this plan. They did not want to see it all residential. The Planning Commission was definitely, they were in favor of hearing the discussion and having the discussion, but ultimately decided that the split use was a more appropriate use for the property. But again, it was a lengthy discussion, and we kind of went through all the pros and cons. One of the pros, again, was we were able to grant that additional right-of-way. I think it's important to note with respect to that right-of-way, where we are now because of the existing condition, we have an existing lot that abuts a street that does not have conforming right-of-way. It's not necessarily a requirement. It's up to the discretion of the Board of Supervisors whether they want to expand an existing road or an existing right-of-way or an existing development abuts a pre-existing road without adequate right-of-way. So it really is at your discretion. But it was something that we vetted with the Planning Commission. In order to make this project work, a split-use work, maintain that commercial, get parking into a conforming state, we need to have it as it is. It was something we considered, and again, it was important that we keep that commercial use to satisfy both the neighbors and ultimately the Planning Commission.
I agree with keeping it mixed use. That's what our comp plan specifically calls for in that specific location. So I'm with you on that. But to Don's question, which I don't really feel like I understood an answer to, have you considered, is it possible to engineer your parking, moving it over so that you still have the same parking but you're not in the right of way?
The parking would come too far back to allow this plan to work as we're showing. We've even, again, we've shrunk the building a substantial amount, almost 1,000 square feet, is that right? 900 square feet, to bring it as tight as possible. If we push the parking back an additional percentage, it's going to move it into the building. And again, we're right up against the zoning line, and we're also right up against impervious cover on the back. We have lots of impervious cover to give on the front. It wouldn't work with our plan. We did look at it. We've gone around and around with it because we know it's important, and obviously we'd rather not have the debate. If we could give it, we would give it. In order to make this plan work for Kaz, we can't. The only way we could do it would be, again, with the single use, which we proposed, we were happy to move forward with, but it was not received, again, by the neighbors, and that's very important to Kaz.
Just, if you can clarify, with the 6 townhomes, you're at the limit of impervious limit on that zoning? Is that basically it?
We have the table. I can look and see exactly. Do you know offhand what the numbers are?
Right now we have split zoning. The R5 district is where we're showing the residential use. Allowed impervious is 36%, which would be 13,800 or 389. We're at 12,731, so we're at 34.23%. We're a little bit under the 36. But with the R5 or the C1 district, you're allowed 60% impervious, and right now we're at 50%. 0.6%.
And how about on the access road, the
access
lane?
road, as we're looking in, this access road we're looking at as part of the C1 district. It is in the C1 district, and that's included in that percentage.
And was there an opportunity to put any parking, head-in parking on that access road, widening that such that there could be parking that could be counted on the commercial use? Because, I looked at...
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, okay,
If
let me
if we were to
clarify.
add parking here, it's still in the C1 district, so it's not making any difference.
But the parking that's in the right-of-way is for the C1 use.
Yes.
Okay, so if you were to shift some of the parking from the front of that lot to decide where the access road is, you still have the higher impervious limits that you have under commercial 1 versus...
The way the parking is oriented is that all the spaces head in facing Conestoga Road. In order to come out with that, you'd be putting parallel spaces in order to get your aisle width, and then you would be doing the same thing on the parallel spaces somewhat here. We're trying to present a buffer area which will be planted, plus you have that parallel parking issue of conflicting with a residential, what we would consider as a driveway that's serving just the residential use. So the idea was to avoid that conflict of uses for that driveway.
Just so I understand, the reason you can't push the parking to the back of the property is that that's going into the residential zone?
This line here, this heavy dotted line, is the zoning district. By pushing this back in here, we are in the residential district, and we felt it best to keep the commercial parking with the commercial district and the residential parking with the residential district. And again, because we're looking at the 36% impervious in the R5 versus the 60% in the C1 district.
John Rice, it was my understanding that you believe that it would be not allowed to take that commercial parking and put it into the residential area, that you wanted the commercial area to be parked in the commercial portion, the residential portion?
Not without a variance.
Pardon?
I mean, they would
Yeah,
have to
yes,
go to the zoning
understand.
hearing board and get a variance to do that.
So your interpretation of our code required that the commercial area be fully parked and the residential
Yes.
area be
Yes.
fully parked?
Is the proposed parking lot for the commercial, is that on the same footprint as the existing parking conditions or not? I don't have the other drawing in. Fairly close. So
It's
I guess
set
I'm
back.
asking, is it somewhat of an existing condition?
It is, because we've maintained the setback. The existing parking exists on this line now. It's further, it does cross over into the residential now. Again, it's unmarked parking. You can see how it crosses over, but it is the exact same setback line, and that was something we had to discuss early on in the process as well. We had to go back and meet with Mr. Kachansky and determine exactly where the center line was to make sure we got the appropriate front yards on either side, because we have the West Wayne front yard and the Conestoga front yard, and we had to make sure we kept all of our parking. If we were going to maintain that line, we had to keep it all on the Conestoga Road side. So we've done that.
And what's the distance from that parking line to the curb? I can't tell from here.
Dave, do you have that?
Approximately?
Dave will scale it out for you.
It's approximately 15 feet from the curb to the edge of the parking.
Question for Steve. If we were to propose some type of a turning lane or something there in the future, I mean, we've done this in other locations where we take that land there and put the lanes in, and 15 feet is more than, I believe a lane is around 12 feet.
It may require the use of a retaining wall versus slope, so the costs do increase. And like I said, I don't know that it would be required, but just try to reduce future exposure for the township from a cost standpoint in obtaining that land or performing the work, should it ever come to fruition.
Okay, so, but the cost of the retaining wall would be borne regardless of whether it's in right-of-way or an easement. But I think, I guess what's the hang-up for me also is that we shouldn't have to pay for that land If it should right now be right away.
Well, the one thing I wanted to bring up is the question about the need for a left-hand turn up West Wayne Avenue when up at the next block you have traffic prohibitions that will not let you continue straight on. You're required either to turn left back to Route 30 or right, which would take you back down the Conestoga Road. So there's not a heavy left turn traffic movement there under today's conditions because of the one-way traffic out of Wayne proper heading in the west direction.
Steve, is your concern the left turn lane off of West Wayne or onto Conestoga?
The concern would be some future intersection, depending on how the other corners got developed, and some future configuration. And as my colleagues just reminded me, we do have sidewalk in that area right now. So if you were to push back, you still have to have room for the sidewalk. So it's not an even swap. And 5 years from now, 8 years or 10 years, I don't know what that configuration, if required, might look like. And it might not be that movement, but it might be some taking of that ground to accommodate some movement, maybe because we can't get it on the other side. It could be a shift of the intersection.
Why wouldn't you be able to get it on the other side?
If, let's say, one of the parcels did not redevelop, and the right-of-way is what it was, and we decided we had to do some type of intersection work, if that was a boundary on one side, it would still allow us to do something on the other. The easement, I think, was a nice idea by the applicant, but an easement doesn't help us in the fact that if we were to do something in the easement, if we put a utility in the easement, that would be perfect because we have the option to own, operate, maintain, and enlarge within that easement, and we just replace the asphalt when we're done and the parking stays. But to do something larger, we can't take away that parking. We can't do a project that would eliminate that commercial property's parking in the front or shorten it.
And I just want to point out that the need for a left-hand turning lane going in that direction seems really remote right now. I totally agree with that because of what you're heading into. However, down that one-way street is the library, post office, parking lot complex, which probably will get redeveloped at some point, that whole complex. And we don't know what's going to go in there eventually, how that will look in 20 years. And so it isn't totally unrealistic to think that there will be a lot more traffic heading that way someday. And for us, to not protect this option now and have some future board then have to do a taking procedure for it, it seems illogical.
That was certainly a balance that the Planning Commission grappled with. This was something that we talked about almost at every Planning Commission meeting. Ultimately, we brought in aerials, we looked at the other properties, we spoke about the other properties at the last Planning Commission meeting. And again, in order to get what you would need on other portions of this intersection, the severity of that impact would be much greater. There would be demolition, most likely across the street. The property located, diagonal from us has its parking sitting with no grass or any barrier coming right off the road. So there's significant issues that exist out there. And again, in order for this project to be viable, for this parcel to be developed to maintain that commercial use out front and a residential use in the back, this was the best we could do. And through that process, we were able to get a great majority of the Planning Commission to agree that it was the best use and it was smart planning for this site. And we understand there's a balance. There's always a balance. And that's why we went to PennDOT. We tried to determine what their long-term plans were, and they have none. We asked the township, do you guys have anything coming up? And the answer was no, not now. We may, and that's consistent with what we've heard tonight. But we'd like to develop this property now. We think it's a good use. We're maintaining a split use, which is very important to the neighborhood.
David, I have a bunch of questions about the proposed development. So either you or Dave, could you go back to the drawing that shows the... So since there are no lot lines shown, I'm assuming this is essentially a condo complex.
This will be a planned community, yes.
Right. And is the commercial property going to be part of that?
Yes, it will. much like the Steeple View had the residential
Yeah,
component.
yeah. So you have, each of these units appears to have a two-car garage? And is there room to park a car in front of those garages and not
Yes.
interfere with the traffic?
Yes. That was, again, another point that we
Right.
discussed at great length with the planning
And then the
commission.
other thing is, I'll give you an even money bet right now that these folks are going to want to put decks on or patios. And that's just going to blow us out of the water with your impervious.
That's, are there, we're,
Yeah, I don't have a drawing that shows me that, so.
Tim Wentz, I'm with Gate 17 Architecture. We already planned for patios, and that's within the impervious calculation. Any decks would be up in the air off the first floor, the first living floor, so they would not be included in the impervious.
So these are classic townhouses where there's no living space on the ground floor?
There will be a room on the first floor behind the garages, but the majority of the living space is on the second and third floor.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, decks would be included as part of the impervious coverage, whether they're on the ground level or raised above that. So just for a point of clarification.
So a couple of comments. One, I think a turning lane here would be very undesirable. And I don't think that West Wayne Avenue is really going to support any more traffic. So I'm not sure that, I'm not very interested in protecting the right to get a turning lane because I don't think it's going to be very desirable. And then at this point, I think these waivers seem very reasonable to me. The first one seems, if we have the opportunity to decrease the width of a road that's mostly internal, I think that's something we should generally support. And then the second one is I think it would be problematic to put the parking over closer to the residents. And given the sort of peculiarity of this site, this seems like the best arrangement to me. So at this point, unless I hear something that changes my mind, both waivers seem reasonable to me, and I anticipate supporting them.
I have a question for John Rice. John, if we grant the waiver on this parking in the right-of-way, do we lose our vested right in the future then on that right-of-way? Or is this at developers' risk and property owners' risk? Meaning, if they construct this parking lot in the right-of-way, we allow it, does that prohibit us from coming back 20 years from now and saying, hey, we need that right-of-way now?
Well, they'll ask you to pay for it then.
We'll have to pay. Okay, so
I mean, that's, if you're waiving it and they're not setting it aside.
but could we make it a condition of approval that, that we don't want to pay for it in the future? Yeah.
You could always ask the applicant whether he would agree, but you're talking about some other property owner probably down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want the right-of-way and you think it's going to be necessary, my opinion is you get it now.
But I guess I just need a point of clarification. The right-of-way is not established by this approval necessarily. The right-of-way is a fact of the circumstances of the parcel. So you have a roadway, you have a right-of-way that's calculated from, I imagine, the center of the cartway over, or however we do that. It could be the full width. But the point is, the right-of-way exists on roadways
currently,
whether or not we approve a plan. So.
Right, it's going to exist, but we're talking, Steve, are we not, about additional right-of-way?
That's correct. The 60-foot currently to an 80-foot.
So we have 60 now?
Correct.
30 from center line?
The applicant's attorney indicated that that's discretionary. Can you comment on that?
Your ordinance does indicate that it's up to the Board of Commissioners.
Very good. To apply discretion on that matter as to whether they want the additional right-of-way.
Correct.
The extra 20 feet you would need all of that for highway improvements?
And it might not be highway improvement. Again,
or whatever.
In general, my thought is before waiving, my personal suggestion is before waiving right-of-way, before approving right-of-way waivers, I just always try to look at what could be used be needed there in the future. And if it's not a turning lane, perhaps it's a trail that we are unaware of or a path that we are unaware of that has something to do. We have the Levin track down the street. I don't know what it is. Each parcel I look at, I always take a close look at the request for that right-of-way waiver if there is some project, whatever it may be in the future, that we could do.
If we gave a waiver for only 10 feet instead of 20 extra, would that have any bearing on whether you could still put the parking there?
It is only 10 feet on our side. It's a 20-foot
Okay, so only
expansion.
5 feet or 10 feet altogether. Is there some number that we could get extra right-of-way, but you could also fit in the parking?
Dave would have to answer that.
I think without chopping some additional area off the building, making the building smaller and taking away from the building, you're still pushing everything further to the east, which would require some compromise of that building in order to accomplish that.
So those parking spots as drawn go right up to the 60-foot right-of-way line?
Yes, they do, or within 2 feet of that, yes.
My comment on this is, John Nagel probably knows this acutely. When you think about right-of-way and how important it can become, you think about the 5 Points intersection down at Bryn Mawr Hospital and how we had to come literally within feet of the edge of a building to widen that road. And if planners 20 or 30 years ago had thought about that, we wouldn't have this disjointed intersection down there. It would be more flowing and natural. So my inclination is I would not like to give up the opportunity for the additional right-of-way. However, if there is a way to somehow protect our interests, I don't know what that is right now in a live meeting, but maybe John Rice can come back to us with some ideas. But the point is that, we should be able to vest that right and maintain that right-of-way for, at even 80 feet. But of course, that could become a hardship for future owners of the property. I don't know how that would work. I do support the effort to separate the uses, keep the residential area residential, don't try to blend commercial parking in with it, and also the fact, and try to dedicate the access lane use just for the residential. I think that's a good idea. My only comment is that, if we're up against the impervious limits, then you're building to the limit. And the question is, do you have to build to that limit, to do what you want to do? I understand, you're going to try to maximize your plan.
Right.
You're going to build within the envelope that you have.
No.
But, the fact that you're so close to the impervious limit on the residential side raises some, well,
The commercial side, we are not.
Not on the commercial, but on the
residential
residential
side, our building coverage is nowhere near that limit either. It's an impervious coverage issue. So, we're really dealing with a very unique piece of property here. We've got a corner piece of property that has a zoning line zigzag basically through it. We've done all we could here. We got rid of a very dangerous intersection. We knew that was high on the township's priority list. Right in the middle of the intersection, we've corrected that dangerous traffic condition. We've offered the easement to allow them, like Mr. Norsini said, to do any public works they may need. We thought, based on our conversation with Mr. Kachansky, that would also allow some give on maybe traffic improvements, traffic lighting improvements. We thought that was a possibility within that easement without having to come back and ask for any property owner permission. We also took a hard look at the site and how this conforms with every other piece of property around it. And just the fact of the matter is, there are no 80-foot right-of-ways here. None. And we did look. The Planning Commission said, well, how about that left turn lane? It was something they asked. And then when they realized you're going down to a dead end, essentially, that didn't make any sense. Then the question ultimately became, well, what's PennDOT thinking? So that's why we had to go back to them. And we've tried to cross all of our T's, but the viability of this project, unfortunately, hinges on that. Because once you start removing what's already there, you have a condition that did not conform to your zoning ordinance. We're trying to bring it into conformity, because that was something the Planning Commission felt strongly about. Well, how about a use that comes in after the fact, and maybe they need more parking than is there right now? We want to make sure you have adequate parking to serve a commercial building of that size. So we gave them the parking they needed to do that. But in order to kind of satisfy everybody in their efforts, unfortunately, we haven't been able to satisfy Mr. Norsini and some of the township folks, and we understand that. If we could give it, we would give it, because we don't want to have to ask for a waiver unless we think it's necessary for this project and it's consistent with the properties around. And we just believe that it is. We think this is a reasonable waiver given what we're trying to do on this property. Again, we could have done it all residential, and it would have been totally conforming with respect to that setback. But it's just not
Can I
within-
just a brief response to the
Yes,
turning
sir.
lane? The turning, if you think about turning lanes, everyone, it's not about the destination. The turning lane is about keeping traffic flowing through that intersection on Conestoga Road. Do we need it now? I would never have imagined that we would have done 5 points. I traveled that route. This is over at Bryn Mawr Hospital.
Yep, I
For
know it well.
15 years, would never have imagined having turning lanes there. I always thought, how could they ever do that? It was done, and it has greatly improved that intersection.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, this is just an entirely different area than 5 Points. though.
I get it.
This is a
I get it.
tiny little commercial, residential
It's
interface, and
It's not about-
If
it's
we,
not
if we
about
engineer
that.
these intersections with turning lanes, I mean, I would imagine there's going to be considerable resistance
But again,
from people in
it's
the
the
neighborhood.
13,000 cars that traverse Conestoga Road every day.
But
So
there's already too many of them turning down West Wayne. I mean, I don't think we want to encourage getting more traffic.
I don't want to encourage you, but the two cars that will stack at
Instead
that
of having a
intersection.
commissioner debate, let's see if there's any member of the public wants to comment on this. Is there any member of the public here wants to comment on this? What's that? Not debating one another.
Good evening, and thank you. Kathy Wright, Lenore Avenue, the persistent representative of Lenore Avenue Neighborhood Association in the West Wayne District of South Wayne. So in 2007, when the developer of Wicklow wanted to come across the street and develop this piece of property, we got together with 35 signatures and the support of Tom Masterson, our commissioner at the time, and went before the Board of Commissioners and asked them to please not change the zoning, which was what that developer wanted to do. And then we came before the board, we worked with implementation, but our bottom line is to continue to be respectful of the comprehensive land use plan, which impacts our neighborhood, Garrett Hill, and certainly, as you heard tonight, Ithan. So all of these small neighborhoods, Garrett Hill is a nightmare to turn, and Ithan is a nightmare to turn, but I'm not sure, obviously, that's all your decisions to make, but we would just ask the neighbors on Lenore Avenue that you give consideration to this particular plan, which supports the comprehensive land use plan to continue with mixed use. I can't imagine the IAC plans on leaving at all, so I don't know what their property is going to do. That hill would be terrible. I don't know what's going to go into the Mediterranean Grill. It seems that they're gone now, so hopefully a food establishment will go in with some good deli sandwiches to bring our neighbors up to eat food on that corner. We have a great neighborhood. We walk everywhere. We would just ask that you entertain the continuation of mixed use on that corner.
You see this plan as continuing,
We see this as the best plan
Yeah.
since 2005.
and the statement I
Seven,
made about,
sorry.
I mean, my sense is that people here would not want more turning lanes on this
I think
intersection.
you were absolutely right on, Mr. Curley, and I
Okay,
appreciate you
thank you.
being my commissioner, having made that statement.
Any other member of the public?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, just to comment, I just like to say I agree with Commissioner Curley on this, that we look at speed bumps all the time and speed humps and traffic calming devices. This is one that really actually helps to control that because given the area, given the residential nature of this particular intersection, of how close this neighborhood is here, this is almost a natural traffic calming type situation here. Because if we did go and add additional lanes, that means there's some reason why we're going to draw more traffic or push more traffic through this particular area. And then not revisiting again speed tables, speed humps, and those types of things. I think this is an opportunity which, again, we're able to control speed in this particular area, and that this fits within, I believe, not only.
So
this
you
plan, this
disagree with your
development.
Director of Public Works, and you're saying we shouldn't get the easement?
I'll say that we both have difference of opinions,
Okay,
and that's
all
why I
right,
encourage
all
Steve
right.
to have those types of opinions.
All right. Any other
I
commissioner
do have
comment?
one last question about ownership. So moving forward, who is going to be the owner of the commercial property?
So initially, it'll be its own unit, and Kaz will retain that ownership like he has at Steepleview, but that'll be a unit much like any other unit that could be sold and transferred as an individual piece of the association.
So will the homeowners that are right next to that have any say in the next owner of that commercial unit?
They won't have any say in the next owner, but they'll have say in the bylaws and the association rules that control the use of the property, which will impact the entire parcel, the entire collective parcels. So it'll be an association, a declaration that's recorded with the recorder of deeds, and that'll control the rules and the regulations and limitations, anything that Kaz would want to put on now, and that the homeowners would eventually review before they purchase and sign off on, and that will control everything on this property. So any change would have to then go to all the unit owners once it gets outside of declarant control, which is
Right. So I just want to avoid, the Chinese restaurant going in there and devaluing all the homes that those people have, that type of thing.
right. So those are the things we're going to.
Yang Ming is the #1 Chinese restaurant in America. What's wrong with Chinese
It's
restaurants?
delicious. You don't want the event blowing on your gorgeous townhome all night long.
So those types of restrictions and things Kaz will look at in developing this. Obviously, Kaz has done these types of developments before and is very aware of the importance of maintaining those property values and keeping the residents happy. That's of the utmost concern to Kaz. I mean, he's got to market these units, and this declaration will be reviewed by all those owners prior to their purchase. So that's something I'm sure they're going to want to consider, and something they will consider. So Kaz will be sure, and that'll ultimately come to the township as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
I
We
will
appreciate
say,
it.
just to the last point, we have extended the sidewalk. We do understand the importance of the walkability of this community. As it is now, the sidewalk stops at the intersection, and we are extending it further down West Wayne Avenue, even to the extent where we've received approval from the neighboring property owner to put the sidewalk in across his property. So,
And that's the only section that it meets up with sidewalk right there?
I don't know if there's sidewalk, does it meet up there as well?
Is there a sidewalk on Conestoga, Dave?
There is, yes.
Right.
The sidewalk on West Wayne Avenue stops at this point here at the zoning line, which is to the next property over. So we're extending, as part of this project, a sidewalk through the next property to join up with the existing
And
sidewalk.
so let me comment on that is very, very valuable, because anyone coming from the trail to downtown Wayne currently has to walk through either an area that doesn't have sidewalk or across the parking lot of a bar or restaurant and across the parking lot of a chiropractor's office. So what this improvement, and neighbors have talked to me about this improvement in particular, does is it gives us sidewalk access all along that portion of West Wayne Avenue. And not great control, but much better access from the trail to downtown Wayne than we currently have. So it's a big improvement, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wait. Briefly, there are 8 recommendations by staff on page 3. Is the applicant in agreement with these conditions?
So we are not in agreement with condition number 7. We don't see how it bears any relevance to what we're doing on this property, or it's for perpetual care and maintenance of North Wayne Cemetery.
Well, I think staff may want to comment on this, but the point here is that this is directly adjacent, diagonal to your parcel.
No.
Well, in essence, it is.
Oh, it is.
Wow. You could draw a line. It may have to go a little further than expected, but okay, it may not be a straight line. I haven't surveyed the site. Is there any interest at all in
There's
being
not.
constructive?
There's not. We discussed these conditions. Obviously, 1 through 6 we're very comfortable with, and 7 and 8 are kind of impositions on the applicant. And Kaz is willing to accept 8, assuming we can work out with the Director of Public Works, Mr. Norsini, what he's envisioning that cost might be, if the existing signals are going to be receptive to that type of preemption device. But assuming that that's reasonable, we're okay with that. We think that's a good thing. We're trying to make the intersection better. We think that helps. This type of maintenance so far off of our property, we just we can't support that type of a condition.
I applaud staff for thinking very creatively, but I don't think we should press this one. I think we should strike number 7 also, that the link is too far.
You can't make them do it anyway. They
Yes,
have to agree to
yes.
it. So if they don't agree to it, they don't do it.
Very good.
Any comment from staff on that?
Sure. With this development here, again, it has an impact to the neighborhood. This is a blighted area upon the neighborhood, and I know from my perspective, very appreciative to the improvement to this area. However, you'll have residents that are there. You'll have them traversing to the trail, which is very popular. You know, depending on the commercial use there, you'll have residents from the neighborhood going past this. I think this development has an impact on the neighborhood. I think this would be a very good gesture on behalf of the applicant to be able to do this, because I think it will be very much appreciated by the neighbors within that area there that may see both sides of this coin. And again, maybe there's a different way to be able to go about and accomplish this, to be able to work on this. I think John Rice and I, we just spoken about this as some opportunities to be able to do this. So,
Are you
it does have an
objecting to
impact.
the sort of the concept of helping out, or are you objecting to I mean, I kind of, if I was sitting in your shoes where it says agrees to pay for perpetual care and maintenance is a bit of a reach.
It is. We obviously have no problem helping out. I mean,
So for example, just to think aloud, and I don't know if Bob's on, I suspect on the residential side that's common ground, and you'll have some kind of contractor coming in and cutting the grass.
that'll be part of the HOA, right? They'll hire a
So
landscaper.
could that person, as part of that cutting the grass there, agree to cut the grass at the cemetery down the street?
If the township wanted to pay him to do that, we'd be happy to include that in our contract with him.
You know, we would be more happy to, when they would contribute to the township annually, we'd be more than happy to pay the bill on that. So I think that would be a good compromise. But I think as part of this, though, is maybe as a way to compromise on this, if there's a way in which you would agree to be able to bring that property up to a standard there with some fence replacement, getting the grass to where it needs to be and all of that, and then from that point, then maybe the township could take over from there. So maybe this is, instead of forever, is a way to be able to bring it up to a standard that the township has, and then from there, we could look at taking it from there as a maintenance type issue.
I'll certainly discuss that with Kaz. Obviously, our initial response to the condition as it was written was we just could not agree to that type of condition so far off of our property. But we do understand the importance of the neighborhood. Again, that's why we went to a neighboring property owner and asked to put a sidewalk in where that's over an adjoining property owner's property. So we understand the importance of the viability of the flow of the neighborhood. And we certainly are not averse to helping out, but we want it to be reasonable and consistent with what we're trying to do on the property.
We would appreciate if you can do something. And I will not appreciate if any of the new residents of your condos complain about the conditions at the cemetery in the future.
Thank you.
Have you found any graves on the Wella Court? Any graves there? All right, thank you.
Excuse me, Commissioners. I just wanted to remind you that the 90-day MPC clock expires on September 30th. There have been several extensions by the applicant, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It's likely that we're not going to be receiving revised plans and have sufficient time to review them for the applicant to come before you at your next meeting. So I'm suggesting perhaps that the applicant grant an additional extension.
Is the applicant willing to grant an extension to the township for the preliminary plan approval?
So we are generally not opposed to granting that extension, but we are only in the preliminary plan process. So we think we could probably have our preliminary plan approval before we get to that point.
Maybe I'm confused. The clock is running out on the preliminary approval or the final?
Preliminary.
The preliminary.
Your intent would be to be before us at the next meeting in September,
That's
which would
correct.
mean that you would comply with
So
the
this is
current
on the
deadlines.
24th?
Right.
And
That's correct.
But when will you be submitting the plan, the preliminary plans, revised plans to the township?
We don't really see many revisions.
I thought there was the emergency vehicle access.
You're talking about the soil?
Correct.
And that was something we discussed with Planning Commission. We thought that would be a final land development issue, and it would just be a note on the preliminary plan or a condition of preliminary approval that we install compacted soil there that would allow fire truck, and they seem to be in agreement with that concept, that it would be a final plan issue. So that's why we have that, obviously.
I think it's in our best interest to have that in the preliminary plan approval, and the criteria of such improvement.
Is that true? Is it in our best interest, or is it sufficient to proceed as the applicant has indicated? Sorry for interrupting.
Well, the reason I say that is that we don't have the ability to reject the final plan approval. We only have the ability to approve the preliminary, and if we don't approve the final, you'll get the approval. So
that's why we're willing to accept the condition.
Yeah.
That be installed.
I think it would help us, at least for me, to better understand what that will be on our next meeting, and that engineering and staff are fully understanding of what that will be, and it will be described.
But that can be done
you know-
conditionally as part of the preliminary.
That's my point. It can all be done through condition, because that really is something that's going to have to be detailed with the engineer as we get through it.
And then it can be rejected at final if it's not compliant with
That's
the
correct.
condition. Of
Well, let me just clarify. We have a July 31st engineering letter from Gilmore. That's the last letter.
And I think that was one
Correct?
of the conditions, right, that we would comply with all of that.
So in that letter, there's 6 or 7 pages. I mean, there's been no plans submitted that meet this at this point. Right? I mean, that was the last set of plans that was reviewed.
That's correct.
That was your letter, John, that you issued.
That's correct, John, and many of the responses to the comments in that letter indicate that the applicant has indicated that they will address
comply.
these comments. Yes, that
Right.
they will comply.
There's a planning module sewer issue in here.
There is.
Has anything happened with that? Because I know that's been one of those issues that hangs out there for a long time, beyond final. Do we even know, Steve?
I have not seen anything.
No, we haven't seen anything on that, and we can't, I won't speak for Dave, Mr. Fiorello, but before we get through the whole process, this has to go further in the approval process before you can start doing the downstream letters.
Yes, we've gone through the process. We've assembled all our package and ready to submit to the downstream authorities to get the planning module approval or to get their sign-offs before we come back here. Our intent was to have that as part of our final plan application.
So that'll be part of the sign-off for the planning module?
Yes.
But that process has started?
Yes, we have started that. We've gotten our paperwork together. I need a signature from Cass on the form, but that will be sent out within the next couple of days to Radnor, Haverford, to start the process to the downstream municipalities.
I mean, there's a lot of comments in here, I guess.
There are a lot of comments. A lot of those comments referred to engineering details and things that I thought were probably best addressed at the final plan stage. They were talking about a number of details. In our response to the township, we did note that we would comply with all these things. Our intent is to comply with them all as part of the final plan.
I mean, I agree a lot of these are conditions that you get attached, but we have a few things to discuss between now and, I mean, we're talking about 2 weeks from tonight, so.
Well, one in particular is page 6 on the stormwater management ordinance review. It looks like that if the property failed infiltration.
We do have.
Is that something that's being done?
We have conducted infiltration. We had infiltration tests done prior to this, and we noted to the engineer that we had fairly good infiltration. We've done additional testing at other locations throughout the site. We have very good perk back in the corner. We have very good perk in this area here, and our intent is to provide the stormwater management to meet at least the minimum requirements of the township, if not better.
And does the engineering agree with that?
Well, it remains to be seen. I guess my concern is to be able to provide you with a relatively clean letter for your next board meeting. I would need to receive revised plans and these additional calculations in the very, very near future. And,
So 7 days, you need to have all this within 7 days, maybe?
I would like to see it within less than 7 days. Yes, sir.
Is the applicant able to do that? And this goes back to me saying, are you willing to extend this period? Because it sounds like we need more from you to have this on the next agenda. And our engineering needs to be able to give us this letter. And it wouldn't be fair to force them into a 2 or 3 day review process.
Understood.
So, I mean, I don't think we're asking for a big extension here. I think.
No.
Maybe it's 14 days, enough to get us to the next Board of
So
Commissioners
if we are unable to get the plans together in the next few days, we will happily grant the extension.
Okay.
And we have in the past. It's never been an issue granting an extension, so we're not
There's
trying
been
to...
several extensions, correct?
That's correct.
So-
Yeah, and we're not trying, we just want to make sure that we have what we need to do,
Right.
do what we need to do.
So we'll work with Mr. Sartor, and if we can get it done, we'll get it done. And if it becomes an impossibility on either end, we'll grant the extension. Absolutely no problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
fair enough, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, Don, we're going to go back. Don, we're going to go back to Jim on the certificate of appropriateness. All right? Oh, you're done? Okay. Jim?
Yes, this is consideration of a certificate of appropriateness under our historic, architectural, and review ordinance. A little history here is in order. The house in question, which this certificate pertains to, is located at 219 Poplar Avenue in North Wayne. North Wayne is a National Historic District created in 1985 by the residents. This is not a contributing property in the sense that the properties in the historic district were analyzed and noted to be of historic significance because they were constructed from 1885 to 1890. Nevertheless, this house, the building permit that was issued in February ultimately came under the aegis of HARB because it is part of the North Wayne Historic District. So the building permit was issued in February. HARB considered the building in May and approved it. In between the issuance of the building permit and July, significant changes were made by the builder, Mr. Wynn, who's with us tonight, in the form of plans to tear down the house that was there, leaving a simple foundation, and to build a much larger house. So what we have now is a significantly larger house than the rancher that was there before. And there's been a fair amount of controversy around what's happened here. We have residents on both sides of the issue being whether let me focus on the issue. What's before our board tonight is a request to have the certificate of appropriateness approved. Now, a little more history. This board did approve the certificate on August 20th with conditions. The conditions were that the builder's request to build a second-story addition to house his master bathroom and the builder's request to expand the existing 1950s era garage were both conditions attached, and they were both denials. In other words, the certificate of appropriateness was approved for the property, but those two conditions were attached, which meant that the builder could not add that second-story addition and could not add the garage. All right. After that meeting on August 20th, the builder's equitable owner, or maybe not, that's not the right term, but his prospective buyer approached me and asked whether I could arrange a compromise between the residents who opposed the construction in its entirety and the builder, Mr. Wynn, and the prospective buyer, Dr. Wendt, who's also in the audience. Dr. Wendt then went through the neighborhood and got a petition, and it was discovered that there was significant support for continuation of the building with both the garage allowed and the second-story addition allowed. So even though I was in the majority on the 4-3 vote on August 20th, whereby we denied the right, in effect, we approved the certificate, but we denied the right of the builder to add those two things, I realized that there was significant support for the builder, and in particular, Dr. Wendt and his wife, Bridget. And as a result, I publicly announced that I was changing my position, and I would now support the garage and the second-story, what's called a bump out, to house the master bathroom. That didn't end things. A hue and cry then arose in about the last 4 or 5 days from people on the other side of the issue. Some of them on Poplar Avenue, but many of them not on Poplar Avenue. Their concern was, in part, objection to the idea of the very large house on a relatively small lot, which incidentally is not uncommon in North Wayne. In fact, my house is a fairly large house on a small lot. Their objection was that if tonight our board were to go back and reconsider and grant the certificate of appropriateness without the 2 conditions, then we would be doing violence to the process under our ordinance, the Historic Architectural Review Board ordinance. So I gave considerable thought to that position, and today I decided that in deference to the views of the community, without regard to whether this house is proper or not, but with regard to the process, that is giving respect and deference to the Historic Architectural Review Board ordinance and the role that the HARB, the board itself, plays in our scheme of regulation in the township, that was the that's my personal justification for now asking this board to remand or resubmit the certificate of appropriateness back to the HARB for their evaluation. Now, I must add, and this is very, very important, I have not changed my position on the validity and the legitimacy of adding the garage, expanding the garage, according to plans that I'm sure the builder, Mr. Wendt, will produce for us, and of adding the second-story addition for the master bathroom. My purpose here is to simply let the process work to accommodate our Historic Architectural Review Board ordinance, and so that people, when it is remanded, people on both sides of the issue, including those supporting and those opposing, including the builder's buyer, and anybody else, will have an opportunity to appear before HARB, voice their opinion, and then have HARB take action. And what I would hope HARB would do is to listen to the voices of opposition and make some adjustments to the architectural details, add architectural details or add things to the second-story addition as proposed by Mr. Wynn, the builder, and add things to the garage, in each case to make them more in line with or conducive to or harmonious with the neighborhood and other houses on the block. So that's what I would like our board to do.
Well, I'm very confused. Are you asking us to send back to the HARB something that they've already looked at and reviewed at and just asking them to look at it again?
In essence, yes. Because there has not been an adequate opportunity for people on both sides of this issue to express their opinions. And I feel that if our board moves ahead now and approves a new certificate with the 2 conditions eliminated, we will have people lose confidence in the process. I've had people tell me that they think I personally am tramping on the HARB ordinance. They think that if we do this without giving HARB another opportunity to review this, that we will have, it will be a signal to future builders to come into our historic districts and take liberties with what's going on there.
Is the HARB going to see something different than they saw before?
They will certainly see something different in the garage, I can tell you that, because...
So you're changing...
Already Mr. Wynn has scaled down the pitch of the roof of the garage, but I don't want to get ahead of the story here. That's for the HARB to
I don't understand
evaluate.
if they're looking at something different, because why would you send it back if they're looking at the same thing?
Well, let me say that I wholeheartedly believe that that is the proper disposition at this point. My vote on this, and I hope most other commissioners' votes, was not based on popular opinion and what the majority of the neighbors wanted. It was based on HARB's experienced and expert view of what development properly comports with the rest of the historic nature of the neighborhood. So for us to now say, oh, well, that's not the popular view anymore, now the majority wants this building, it would just completely denigrate the finding that HARB made. My hope is that we send it back to HARB with the direction that, or the suggestion that there is probably a compromise to be had here, and that there, with some tweaking, this plan or some variation of it might be more in keeping with the historic attributes of the neighborhood. What was presented to them and then presented to us, they did not find to be in keeping with the neighborhood, but perhaps with some compromising and some tweaking, they may find that the next product that comes out of that is more in keeping, and they can support it and send it back to us.
So, Mr.
Well,
Nguyen,
just a minute. Speaking for the three commissioners voted against it, we voted for it because we felt HARB was overstepping. You know, it was a zoning issue and not a HARB issue. And they overstepped when they said you can't put it on a master bath that's permitted under our zoning, and you can't expand a garage that's permitted under our zoning. Then they overstepped themselves. They weren't just talking about architecture. They now said that they control zoning. And that's what we objected to. And I think that's what the neighbors that have opposed this are objecting to, the fact that HARB is now telling people, even if zoning permits it, if we think it's too big, then you can't do it. And so, you know, sending it back to HARB, you know, my personal position is HARB overstepped, shouldn't go back to HARB. They didn't have the authority to tell them you can't put on a second floor master bath and you can't expand your garage if it's permitted under zoning. And that's the issue. And the problem is you know, you're going to have two forces debating this, and you're not going to come to a conclusion. And, you know, maybe they'll let them expand the garage and they'll let them put on the addition, and they'll say, well, you got to put a little roof here and a little roof there. You know, I understand that. But the fact of the matter is that the message we should send to HARB is you overstepped your bounds, and mass is a zoning issue. It's not a HARB issue. Architecture is their issue. And that's my position. That's what Don said, and I think that's what Kevin was talking about. So
we disagreed on that, and the majority of this board found differently. So
and we accepted that.
Right.
But I just want to make our position clear again.
is there any limit to the number of times the applicant can go back? We don't need to send it to the HARB. The applicant can, in fact, amend their application and go, and we'll have to go through the process, the HARB process again. John,
Yeah,
is
that's happened before on other projects where different aspects of a building were approved by HARB and then something changed. Luella comes to mind, and there were multiple trips back to HARB in that particular situation. I think because of the garage being changed, that definitely has to go back to HARB for them to relook at that.
Is that an administrative function, sending it back to HARB, or does the Board of Commissioners have to?
Well, I
Because
think
I don't think we intervene.
You've already voted on an application, part of which hasn't changed, which is the house. So if the sense of the majority of you is to send the garage back, which I think has to go back because
Now, I'm sorry, why does the garage have to go back? If HARB came in and said,
they've changed the design of the garage. My understanding.
But
from
HARB came in and said that you can't expand the garage, okay? And you cannot put on the second floor. If the commissioners voted in the affirmative to put on the second floor and expand the garage, would they have to go back to HARB?
Well, but the garage is a new application, Bill.
No, it was before us at our last meeting. The expansion of the garage was before us.
Right.
Okay? And we voted 4-3 not to expand the garage and not put on the bathroom.
Correct.
If we had voted 4-3 to let them expand the garage and put on the bathroom, what would have happened?
They would be building that, I assume.
Well, then, yeah. Well, then,
But this
therefore, we're
garage
right
is
where we were
different than the
before.
one that we would have approved. I understand
Right.
your point.
My
So-
understanding is the roof line is different, and the board can, I mean, what's in front of you tonight, I think what I heard Jim suggest is to remand this back for HARB. You have to do it anyway because of the garage, which is now changed. You can remand it back for them to relook at the whole thing as one piece. They may not change their mind on any part of this, but then it'll come back to you and you can revisit your prior approval.
So my sense is that if this has to go back because of the garage, there isn't much hardship to sending it back to have the second story addition have a pass through HARB. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
Well,
this on? Okay. Actually,
I'm sorry, you got to tell us who you are.
I'm sorry, Michael Gill, counsel for Mr. Wynn. The hardship, sir, would be in extending the process. It's a process that needs completion, and we have a vote from the Board of Commissioners, which obviously we disagree with, as it respects the what we're calling the second floor bump out. Nothing has changed with regard to the second floor bump out, and we have the plans here that we can show you with regard to the reduced garage, but let's just stay on the second floor bump out. Going back to Harb with that would be, there would be nothing to be gained by that, because they'd be looking at the exact same thing that they've already looked at and they've already opined upon, and that we were here before you on the 20th to discuss. So it sort of becomes a question of how many times are you going to go back to Harb with the same thing for them to look at an additional time.
And
There's just
they
nothing
would
to be
look
gained by that.
foolish, I would think, if they went back and changed their mind on the second floor bump.
No, I would encourage them to, and I would hope that they
I
would
understand
change
your
their mind.
position,
but-
but nothing's changed. Why would they change
I
their mind?
talked to several of the Harb members over the weekend, and they were looking at the totality of the project. Therefore, downsizing the garage and lowering the roof line may, in fact, alter their opinion.
It may. That is a very good point. I don't know that I don't know that there's a likelihood of that happening, though. I took from their proceedings that they were looking at it as two separate things. As a matter of fact, they addressed it with regard to two separate motions. We had A, B, and C components of their recommendation to the board.
Mr. Gill, you disagreed with the board's action on August 20th regarding what they voted on that night, correct?
As with regards to the bump out in the garage, certainly, yes.
Right. Why would you not want to go back then and have Harb look at that? Are you arguing against that?
Well, with regard to the bump out, I don't think that there's anything to be gained by that process. I think that if, as Mr. Higgins has said, the sense of the Board of Commissioners is that the second floor bump out is appropriate for the North Wayne Historic District under the ordinance, that this board can make that correction to its earlier resolution right now.
I mean, I agree with you, but I think Mr. Higgins has decided tonight that he would like the whole project to go back as one.
I think that it is unnecessary to send it back. I think it opens up, frankly, a Pandora's box of what we could have coming out of Harb on an issue that they've already made a resolution on, and so has this board.
Do you feel similarly about the garage, or do you have?
No, as I said, when we were here on the 20th, we were willing at that point in time to remove the garage entirely from the scope of the application. And in listening to this board and listening to Harb, we've reduced the scope of the garage and preserving the issue of whether
So
or
you're
not
going to have
it's
to go
even
back
within
to
our
Harb with the
jurisdiction.
garage?
Sorry?
You're going to have to go back to Harb with the garage, and you're willing to accept that?
Certainly.
So what you want tonight is for us to approve the second floor addition tonight and then send the garage back to the Harb?
Correct.
Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, that seems reasonable to me.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I disagree with that. It's the easy way to go, but I think based on the township sending one other developer back through the process multiple times, the issue comes out between consistency and transparency. Whether we see however this works at the end of the day of who agrees, who's different. However, we look at the bigger picture, and for some reason here with the attorney's representation here that something, this board can just do that. To me, that takes the whole process away for us to be able to send other people through, and then we pick and choose who we do send through and who doesn't, who don't we send through, because it is different.
Well, the issue is that Harb makes a recommendation, and then the commissioners make the tough decision, Bob,
No,
and we can
no
continue
agreement.
to send it back, and I don't want to talk about the other one because I can't talk about the other one, but, the fact of the matter is we keep delaying and delaying and delaying, and the process, and if Jim wants to change his vote, then that's fine, because the neighbors want it. If you don't, that's fine,
I respectfully agree with Mr. Spengler, and this process, this application has certainly been marked by nothing other than openness and transparency. This is the third time before this board on a single-family house, and it would be the third time before Harb. with regard to a single-family house. The question before HARB, as we all know, is whether or not and we're only here talking about the bump out and the garage, are appropriate for the North Wayne Historic District. Are they in keeping with the scale of what is in North Wayne? HARB has already passed on that. This board has already passed on that. Respectfully and gratefully, Mr. Higgins has revisited the issue, and we're very grateful for that, and we think it's the right thing. If it's the board's resolution that we should go back to HARB to show them the garage, which they would be looking at for the first time, though I might personally think that's unnecessary, we certainly respect that resolution. But to send the second floor bump out back for them to look at when nothing has changed on it seems to me to be going around in circles.
You have to speak to this side of the aisle.
Well, but as a point of clarification...
Last time you told me to look directly.
That's right. Look directly at me then. Don't
But,
look at
Mr.
him.
Chairman, point of clarification, it's been in front of that board 3 different times because more than likely it has changed 3 different times, so it needs to go there. So it's
This
not like
time
where
it's-
it's the same plan over and over, it's a different plan.
But I
Only
think
on the
his point
garage.
is this time it is the same plan. It's not different, correct, for the second floor?
With regard to the
You're
second
going to
floor
submit the identical plan that you submitted last time?
Yes.
So my sense is, we evaluated that last time. I'm ready to cast a vote again on it tonight. Unless it's different, I don't see
Well,
the need for it
I
to go
think,
back.
Don, what's important to remember here is that there would be an opportunity at another airing before HARB of the opponents being allowed to talk about making architectural detail changes to the second-story addition. To the best of my knowledge, such discussion was not part of the prior 2 HARB sessions. I had a respected architect call me today, I won't mention his name, but he lives in North Wayne, not on Poplar Avenue, and he said that that there is value in going back to HARB. It would give an opportunity to look at that second story anew, to maybe add some things to it, modify it in some way, let Mr. Wynn work with the opponents on it, and come up with something that will satisfy the opponents, maybe not completely, but at least it will do this. It will give us a record whereby we have tried our utmost to take into account the values of those that think historic district might not be getting full consideration with this construction, and that's important.
I would just, not that you're asking for advice, but I would go back to HARB with a spirit of cooperation and trying to work together to get some harmony here. If the exact same plan goes in front of HARB and then comes in front of us, I don't see how we're going to find any differently. This isn't a popularity contest of how many people are supporting it. This is a expert designation of how it fits. And HARB, it's in your court to convince HARB that whatever tweaks and changes that you make do take it from being out of keeping to in keeping. I think that can be done. And if that's done and HARB says, okay, with these changes it does comport better and it comes back up to us, then...
I understand and I completely respect your position, though I respectfully disagree with the suggestion, as you know, as I said at the last meeting, that HARB is the arbiter and it is simply for this board to approve whatever HARB recommends. I think quite the contrary, this board has an affirmative duty to act independently. Let me say this, though. If the resolution is to send this back to HARB, that the second floor bump out is acceptable, that a certificate of appropriateness would issue for the second floor bump out, subject to architectural details of that, and reading from the enabling statute, the general design, the arrangement, the texture, the material, the color, if those are the universe of things, details that we'll be looking at with HARB and trying to reach consensus with neighboring property owners on,
Okay.
then I would be...
We got it. Okay,
supportive of that.
I would like to move that we send this back to HARB, telling them that the commissioners approve the bump out, for them to look at the architectural details to see if they can tweak those, and the same thing with the garage. And that's my motion.
That's the spirit of what you
Yeah.
identified,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
what Commissioner Spengler just identified.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The spirit of what you
Mike,
said
you got to go to
seemed-
Mike.
seemed like Commissioner Spengler captured that, and that made sense to me. I just want to make sure.
Correct, but understanding that if we're at HARB and we reach resolution on these details, or we do our best to reach resolution on the details, and then we come back to you for the ultimate certificate of appropriateness, and there are changes at that point in time, we don't want to be caught in this loop of constantly having to go back to HARB every time we change the details. But frankly, I don't think that would happen. But yes, I think that accurately
my
captures.
sense was that what you're doing is remanding it to HARB, but having them concentrate solely on the architectural details
Of the
to
bulb
make it
out, of the bulb
conform.
out and the garage.
Yeah, so I'll second that.
Well, I'm not going to stand, I can't tonight approve the bump out because I have already made a decision that it did not, what we saw and what was presented to us did not comport with our historic district. And we haven't seen anything to change that. I would support sending it back and encouraging HARB to work to find a way to make this work. But I can't tonight make a statement that all of a sudden, in the last 2 weeks, this became acceptable.
All right, any other commissioner comment on the motion?
I
Any
agree
pub-
with Elaine's position. I wouldn't say we approved the bump out. I would suggest that HARB work with them on the bump out to figure out how to make the bump out work. And then you've already agreed for some changes to the garage, which I believe will probably be satisfactory from what I understand. So,
All right, let's have some public comment on the motion.
And then,
did you get a second?
Yes, I did. No, we're not approving the garage. They have to go to the garage.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Higgins, Commissioners, my name is Michael Wendt. I'm the potential buyer of this property on Poplar Avenue. We have moved up here from Atlanta about a month ago. We're in temporary housing. From a personal perspective, we're seeking approval tonight, or request approval tonight for the bump out. It'd be okay to go back to HARP and work with the neighbors and reach a compromise. I think we've been very willing and very accommodating to show that. We're looking for a house that we can live in. We have 2 little children. We would like to contribute to a community. If we get caught in a vicious circle here where we have to go back and back, then unfortunately we are probably in a position where we have to walk away from purchasing this house in this community. We have to start looking for a new house tomorrow where we can live and where we can move in, and we will have to seek counsel to find a way to protect our current investment that we have in this property, to not lose a lot of money. So with all that respect, we'd ask you to reconsider. We'll be happy to work out with the neighbors architectural details, and we understand that the garage might have to go back. If I may, and the projector works, an argument that has been made at the last commissioners' meeting is the visibility of what is being called the bump out. The house itself got a certificate of appropriateness. Recommendations have been made by the HARP to increase the front porch. Recommendation has been made by HARP to go from vinyl siding to cedar siding. A recommendation has been made by HARP to increase the hangovers of the house. We were willing to do that. We have invested about $75,000 of. We haven't invested it yet, and we might have to withdraw that to protect our investment. To do that, the bump out we're talking about is right here. This thing. The rest of the house got approved. This is the current location of the house from a neighbor's perspective, standing on Poplar Avenue. You could see picture after picture where I don't even think the bump out is visible from Poplar Avenue. The house in itself, we believe, is similar size as the neighbor's house. The garage, you can't even see from Poplar Avenue whether it's visible. And you cannot see the bump out from Walnut Avenue, as was argued the last time. that one could. So we believe the house fits into the neighborhood. Bigger garages are built on Poplar Avenue on lots of similar width. This is the garage that we have at the very moment, totally different perspective. One car barely fits into this garage. We would have to store a lawnmower. We would have to store some yard equipment somewhere. Don't know whether whoever is going to purchase this house would have to, store that in a shed in the backyard or on the front porch. I think this house fits well into the neighborhood, and maybe even better than other houses. So,
All right.
I would ask you to consider to find a way for me and my family to find a house that we can move into, and not make us start house hunting again, and find a way to protect our investment in this property that we have at the very moment and minimize our losses.
So the issue is the garage you can do anytime, the bulb out you got to do now.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Without the bump out, we were looking for a house that works for us as a family. We think it is appropriate for the neighborhood, looking at all the other houses that are in the neighborhood. We think it blends in well. We would like to live in a house that is, meets our needs. If this one doesn't, then we have to move on.
Thank you.
Find otherwise. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
And so I'm sorry, the motion that we put forward is going to allow that to happen, correct? That you'll be able to proceed with the bump out.
The motion you've put forward would allow that. The bump out would be able to be finished. Harb, and you already said that the real cedar siding is acceptable. If there are architectural details, elements in addition to the cedar siding that we would discuss with Harb, we would do that, but we would move forward with the bump out, and we would move forward with the cedar siding in accordance with Harb's wishes.
It would not come, that element of it would not come back to us, is that correct?
Well, the architect, if they wanted to change the architect of
Yeah,
the bump out somehow, that you agreed to.
You're remanding this back with some instructions to your Harb. They're going to look at it, I guess, both with the instructions on the bump out in the garage, and then it's going to come back to this board. You voted on this August 20th, so when it comes back with whatever the Harb recommends, you're going to have to revisit that plan as it sits at that time with Harb's current recommendation. What you're doing tonight is not approving this bump out. You're sending it back as part of the overall review again by Harb with some instructions. That's the way I understand it.
But we're saying to Harb is they can build the bump out. You can tell us about architectural study. You cannot tell us they can't build the bump out because it's mass. That's what we're saying to Harb.
So Bill's motion was to approve the bump out.
Yeah, that the bump out can be built. The only thing you can do with the bump out, Harb, we're sending you instructions, is to look at the architecture of that, not the bump out.
Yeah, but your motion is not to approve anything. You're just sending it back for them to reconsider what they've already done.
I'm sending them instructions that the bulb out is approved by the Board of Commissioners. They can put a bulb out.
In my opinion, you need to vote as a board to approve that first, and then remand it back. Because you've already voted essentially at the last meeting to deny that when you attached the conditions.
No, I understand that.
So you need to reverse that vote if that's what you intend to do.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the new
So
motion
we need clarity on the motion.
The new motion is, it's a simple motion that the Board of Commissioners approves the bulb out. We didn't think that the Harb had the ability to not say you can't build a bulb out. You can tell us about the architecture of the bulb out, but you didn't have the ability to tell us, because it's a zoning issue, that you can't do the build out.
That should be the motion then, that the board is reconsidering what it did last time, and you're now going to consider a vote on approving that bump out with no conditions.
No, the conditions are that you can look at the architecture of that.
With the condition that the Harb look at the architecture, and then it can go back to them.
That's my motion. I made that motion. And the other part of that motion is that the garage issue goes back to Harb in its entirety.
Because it's a new.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the motion I made.
Okay, I just want to make sure we've got a clean record here.
Sorry that I'm still a bit unclear because
No, I'm not going to vote.
Is your mic on?
I'm going to make some changes.
Does the second floor then come back to us? The action we're taking tonight approves the second floor.
That's what Bill's motion is.
And then that's done.
Right.
They go to the Harb, they get non-binding guidance from the Harb.
Right.
And they build the second floor as per the drawings that we saw last last meeting.
Right.
And then the garage comes to us as a new application
Correct.
for all intents and purposes.
Well, but the bulb out, they can look at the lines of the roof of the bulb out.
No,
Right.
I want,
Right?
I'd like to modify your motion, Bill. I
Bulb
don't-
out, bulb out, okay.
Bump
Look,
out.
Bump out.
I've already taken a position that I'm in favor of the second floor addition, and I'm in favor of an expanded garage, modified expanded garage. So I'm not going to retrench from that position.
Understood.
What I do want to have happen is for a meaningful review to take place at HARB. That would be honest efforts by the proponents and opponents, the builder, and HARB itself to reach an accommodation on improvements to the second-story addition as it is now described in the plans through architectural details to make it more acceptable to those people that are opposed to it. If nobody's opposed to it when it gets back to HARB, if they don't think that architectural details are going to help things, then HARB can just do what it's going to do, and we'll get the matter back here. But when it comes back here, well, let me stop there. So I would concur with your approach to issue the certificate, since I've already said I'm in favor of this, but that it's mandatory that the applicant return to HARB and discuss and work out changes, if possible, along the lines of what I've described.
Yeah, and let me make sure I'm very clear on what we're talking about. Sorry.
That's all right. Well, if you're are you ready to vote for the motion then?
We need public comments, though.
No, I understand, but you're ready to vote for the motion? Okay.
As
all
I've
right.
described it,
All right.
yes.
Now, the public comment?
More public comment.
I got it.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is Cindy Walsh. I'm a neighbor about 2 doors down, 225 Poplar Avenue. The one thing I would request that you all consider is the precedent. I understand you want to almost set an example to the builders. I'm concerned as a homeowner about this entire circus and the fact, as we understand it, the residents that support, is that it met with the zoning, that HARB potentially overstood their bounds, and potentially, by your votes, subjected Radnor Township to a lawsuit of our taxpayer dollars that they would then need to defend. Furthermore,
there was no lawsuit.
there
No,
could be, though.
Yeah, well, we don't think there's a lawsuit.
We hope not.
Okay.
But there is that potential.
Yeah, we can be sued for everything.
Yeah, that's true, you could.
But
But the
lawsuit,
bottom line is, we residents put you all in office to enforce the zoning, and you have confirmed that they have met within the zoning ordinances. This family has put an additional $75,000 and 2 months' worth of delays, and you're now requesting them to go back and do more. We renovated our house 7 years ago, and I wanted to move a window 4 inches, and they told me it would cost $5,000. The things that you're proposing and the precedent that you're setting for people moving into my neighborhood, I cannot recommend anyone until this process changes. It's lunacy. We might as well change it from North Wayne to Crazy Town, because you'd have to be nuts to want to come and build within North Wayne.
But you're supposed to be speaking on the motion on the floor, which says that we're going to change that.
Okay.
Okay?
That's good.
Okay.
So we
so
just
you're
want-
in favor of us streamlining the process, allowing, in this case, the builder to proceed?
Yes,
Okay.
very much so.
I wouldn't use the word streamline. I don't think we're streamlining it. but-
No.
We're in
I'm
favor
not going to argue that.
of the commissioners revisiting their view that the builder maintained their zoning code, that the family bought a plan within the zones of the township and should not be subject to any further delays.
Well, HARB does a tremendous job, and we approve 99% of what they come forward with us. But we do have the right to disagree with them.
Good.
Okay? And that's what we exercised at the last meeting and lost, but we're revisiting it tonight.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I'd like to call the
Hold on,
question.
I'm sorry, Bill, but I'm still unclear about the meaning of this motion. So my sense is that what we're going to do is we're going to approve the second-story bump out. There could be some sort of non-binding guidance, but that will not come back to us. That can be constructed, or construction can continue on that portion of the project.
Well, Harb, I
Harb-
think the non-binding guidance you're talking about is possible cosmetic or architectural details
Yes.
on
Yeah.
the bump out.
Yes.
So, I mean, that ultimately, I guess, would have to come back to you also, because you
So-
don't know what Harb is going to do
Right.
with it.
So I'm not sure that this motion is providing what the applicant is asking, because I think the point of what you want and what Ms. Walsh just mentioned is that we're not streamlining the process, or the process is going to come through Harb the
No,
same way.
We're telling them that you can build the bulb out. The only requirement is if the design reviewer looks at it and they want to put a little arch, make some, not change the bulb out. They can build a bulb out. I mean, a build out. They can build a build out. They can build a build out. The Harb is going to look at the architecture of that
Yeah,
and might ask them
But I'm
to.
not interpreting John Rice as agreeing with what you
I
just
think
said.
that still comes back then, because
Yes.
What's that? It only comes back for the architectural detail. They
Right.
can't say you can't build a bathroom
Right.
there.
Yeah, I think what did,
just those aspects
if I just
of
say
it
this,
and the garage.
if your motion carries, the applicant can continue working inside that
Yeah, that's
bump
right.
out. They don't have to remove it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it doesn't pass, they will have to remove it if they want to continue with the
Yeah,
project.
right.
Or wait to go all the way through the process again, so.
So basically, my motion says that they can continue to build out, they take it back, and the Harb cannot say you can't build that. All they can say is, well, maybe the roof line should look like this, or maybe you put a piece of wood here. And that the garage goes back in its entirety for you to discuss with them, and all will come back to us.
That is very consistent with our understanding. If the motion passes, the bump out would be able to continue work. Harb has already told us that real cedar siding is what they want, this board has affirmed that recommendation, or adopted that recommendation, from Harb. We certainly won't expect that to change. We don't expect that Harb's going to say the whole house has to be in cedar siding except for the bump out, which should be in stucco. So the lion's share of what the bump out is would proceed as planned. You're exactly right, Mr. Spengler. If there are line changes, if there are, if they say that we want there to be
lattice,
thank you, something of those,
Okay.
some detail of that type, then certainly that's something that
We got it.
is
We're ready to
appropriate.
vote.
Thank
Okay,
you
thank
very
you.
much.
Let me just say that the motion that's on the floor is basically overruling Harb's finding, and we're not sending it back for meaningful review. We're basically have overruled it and asking them to
Well,
make.
Harb, we've did this before.
I'm just
Harb,
clarifying.
Harb didn't want to tear down two houses on Bloomingdale Avenue, and we voted 4-3 to tear them down. I mean, Harb has its opinion. The Planning Commission has its opinion. In the end, the commissioners make the decision. This decision was already made. Jim Higgins asked us to revisit it, so we're revisiting. Yes, miss, I'm sorry.
Hi, Sandhya Tagavi, and I live down the street on Poplar too. It's getting very confusing, but as confusing as it might be here, know that this is peace compared to a chaotic meeting last week at the library. It's, Mr. Spengler, you speak to, Harb is not about massing, and I understand that, but it confuses me a little bit. So we moved in 2005, about 6 months. After about 6 months, I heard about Harb. We were new in the neighborhood. Our house isn't, quote, historic. We wanted an arts and crafts house, but that's not, nothing was available. I moved from a historic district in Houston, and they had a nice code packet. So my take was, why are you making a board review? Why can't you put it in writing? And so that's what I argued for. And okay, so Harb happened. That's fine. And it's taken me years to figure out why a board review is preferable for our location. That's because the Houston neighborhood was 20 times the size. You had to have things written in documentation. North Wayne is dynamic, it's eclectic, it's hard to put things exactly in writing. And so it took me a while to realize that when you have qualified people with relevant expertise, they can provide you guidance that would be much more meaningful than putting it into code. But I want you to take a look at that code. When you say, oh, if it fits code, it's fine. Well, code, for example, says 25% of my lot can be structure. I can put a structure which is 4,000 square feet on my lot. That's like 3 times what our house is now. That would be good by code. Harb would turn it down. Back on Walnut, they could put 8,000 square foot footprints. Is that really what we're looking for? So I thought Harb was a mechanism to say, look, we didn't want to spend the months and years to figure out the number to put into code. Let's put this body that we trust and this mechanism. So that was my take. I don't think Harb is militant. They're not dictating design details. Actually, I spoke with a neighbor at school pickup, and she said, we took over a year. They were deliberate. They went through proper channels. They sent a survey to every North Wayne citizen, and people were like, no, do not dictate my paint color. Don't dictate this. But yes, we want kind of the look and feel preserved. And I appreciate the hours that the Harb members put in. I also think you're in a little bit of I would ask before you vote on anything that overturns a Harb that you've looked at plan drawings and numbers very closely. Because the numbers are, I'm previously an engineer. I left that a long time ago. I'm not civil. But the numbers are a little bit interesting. The permit 1 to permit 2, impervious cover, the lot size goes all the way to the middle of the street, which is fine because guess what? We're all paying assessments all the way to the middle of the street. But if you count the driveway and the sidewalk and the street and you add it back as not penetrable, your impervious cover goes above your 35%. I don't know if you know that yet.
But we don't count that
You don't count what?
in our calculations of street, do we?
Oh, so this is the common
All right,
sense
well,
part.
the thing is, here's the thing. We're following zoning, and the zoning officer takes care of that. We're not experts on that, but he decides what's impervious and what's not. And as far as the zoning and all, then we would have to change our ordinance because Harb does not have that authority. We would have to change our ordinance what you can build.
But what I'm saying is you just said it. You said, I'm not an expert on that. But you're an expert on how big things can get.
No, my staff tells me what the zoning, what we can build and what we can't build, how much impervious we can. They review the plans. I don't review the plans. That's what I mean.
So maybe I'm just I'm pointing out that I would suggest you look at the numbers really carefully. In a neighborhood that had 6 cars going down the street, and a neighborhood that floods with a basement tripling in size, with impervious cover maxed out or going up to 36%, I think that you better use the common sense test and take a look at your numbers.
Sonia, I've looked at all that. I mean, I've been requested
I have
by...
it right here, Jim.
Well,
I can
I've been requested by you and others to look at that. I've consulted with our township engineer. The issue of impervious surface is clear. Dr. Wendt has agreed with the consent of the builder and the support of the builder to build a seepage bed well in excess of what the legal requirements are for this site. So we will end up with more stormwater control now than exists, or in the future, than exists now. So he's going an extra mile.
this morning about this extra mile. So everyone talks about, because everything else technology-wise is so advanced, we tend to get the false notion that we can fight Mother Nature, and we can't. And from an engineering point of view, I mean, he said those designs are all done in ideal condition. Seepage beds are kind of the trend, but if you look online, you'll see that he says, yes, maintenance is an issue. It's an out-of-sight, out-of-mind thing. So what I've read is maintenance gets hard, it backs up, people cut off the pipes. Then there are the mosquito infestation issues. Florida has a whole white paper on it. So you decide which direction you want to go. You decide whether you want to err on the side of caution. I'll tell you that's what engineers tend to do. They err on the side of caution because we know only so much is within our control.
Thank you.
And on the other point you made, that the house is too big for the lot.
I didn't ever make that point.
Well, you were saying that. You were saying that.
You can't speak from the audience. You have to be at the mic to speak.
The point here is that Harb actually, I'm going to finish now. Harb actually approved this house on this lot twice. in May and August the 1st.
I never said the house was too big. I even sent out an email saying by the structure, 25% of his lot, he could build a 2,500 footprint. So clearly I've never said
So
that.
you think the house is acceptable?
I'm not a judge. Who
Okay.
am I to judge? I'm
Okay.
not. There's
All
a
right.
process.
All right, thank you very
That's all
much.
I was
Thank you.
saying.
Thank you.
I'm not the judge.
Hi, my name's John Mandrak. I live right next door, 221, and I'm the only one with a direct broad view of this bump out. It's nothing big, okay? It doesn't bother us. I think it's a lot about nothing because it's real small.
Thank you.
I'm Marion Childs. I live 215 Poplar, 2 away. I'm glad you're voting again. I think all the legalities are in place. Common sense tells us, let's just get going. The house looks great. I don't think it's much bigger than other houses. Neighbors and, friends and relatives go by, they say, what are you arguing about? This is ridiculous. The house looks nice. It's a much nicer house than was in there. It's a lot nicer looking than a lot of houses on our street. Nice people want to move in. I don't see why you need any more delay.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. We're voting on to permit the bulb out to be built and sending it back to Harb to look at the architecture of the bulb out, if they want to change, and to look at the garage.
So you just said to prevent the build-out. You mean to permit the
To permit the build out, yes, to permit the build out.
We're voting to approve, to basically overturn our last vote. Okay. I'm trying to understand.
So John, go back to what you said if there's an architectural change that comes back.
Right, that's going to come
We
back.
have to vote again on that, on the bill.
But the structure, the bump out,
They know they're gonna have a bathroom there.
You're reversing the decision on that from last month. And then the garage will come back also.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Greenfield on behalf of Matt and Bonnie Marshall, who live at 228 Walnut. Their property is directly behind the construction project and the bump out. If you can show this picture on the screen, it'll give you an idea of what the entire project and the bump out. If you can see right about where where the date 9/1/2012 is written, that's the second floor bump out that we're talking about. And you can get a pretty good sense from looking at this picture of the massing of the entire project as it's seen from the rear. It's quite a difference from what used to be there, and it certainly changes the aesthetics of the Marshall's property. We hope that this board and perhaps possibly the developer would support a variance that the Marshalls can build an 8-foot fence instead of a 6-foot fence between their property and this construction. And also, we would hope the developer would include some buffering to make this less of an imposition on a neighboring property.
Thank you. All right, the question.
My name's Art Donato. I've lived on Poplar Avenue for 26 years. Bill Spingler's been my commissioner since I was about 9 years old. As I understand it, this house is being built in conformity with all zoning laws and regulations. As I understand it, this is going to be a house that's not unlike any other house on Poplar Avenue. And as I understand it, Harb has a mission to protect historically significant buildings. And if my house on Poplar Avenue that I've lived in since 1986 is an historic building, then the Internal Revenue Service owes me a lot of money. Because we're in a district, but we're not historic buildings. I would encourage the Board of Commissioners to vote in favor of Commissioner Spingler's motion, because these people have a right under the zoning regulations to build this bump out. And I don't know what size closets are historical, but they have the right to whatever size closets they want. And if we all want historical houses on Poplar Avenue, then we ought to hook up the gas lamps. We don't have any electricity, and the bathrooms ought to be out back. So I agree with the previous speaker who said enough is enough here. These people aren't doing anything wrong. They're in conformity with Radnor zoning ordinances. We have all built additions and garages and sidewalks and driveways on that street. We have all done it because we've all needed to put our houses in conformity with current needs. That's all these people are doing. Thank you.
I just want to clarify that HARB doesn't only monitor or oversee buildings, they oversee neighborhoods. It's the neighborhood and district, the entire district, and the historic significance of the district. So to look at it building by building is a little unfair. And, taking Bill's motion is going to overturn a decision to support them, which we are absolutely free to do. And frankly, I'd like to see this family move in. I'd like to see them get their beautiful house. And I hope that's what happens. My objection is to this process where we, because of popular opinion, change our minds and decide not to adhere to
You
the
voted the
recommendation.
first way because of popular opinion. Stop kidding yourself.
No,
I have a
absolutely
response
did
to
not,
that, but
Kevin,
the
and I
chairman
really
has called the
resent that.
question.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, just to, I think the attorney makes, some good theater here for his commentary about the historical area, which is interesting, as well as some of the exception I take some of the comments. It's become now an issue of the gentleman buying the home. That's what we've made it about. Instead of codes and rules and regulations, we've made it kind of an issue where I think it's unfortunate that it's become a target of an individual trying to buy a home and trying to move through. However, there's a process that has to be followed as well. But also, as you look as part of the process, and I would give credibility to the issue about a circus, is because there's so much debate and disagreement between what we should and what we shouldn't, and there's no consistency in the process. And now it's become a complete distortion and distraction of the truth, and we make this, that we're picking on a gentleman who wants to move into the neighborhood, who's a good person, and then however it impacts the neighborhood, but then we twist it in all these different sideways and everything else we've done here that has become the problem here. Yeah. So we change things, we differ on things. The issue I look at is consistency, transparency, trying to put these things through. Unfortunately, has gotten caught and trapped in this here, in this whole web here. So the decision the board makes here will set a trend of the direction in which we will go.
It's not setting a trend. It's called democracy. It's not pretty.
That's true.
It's not pretty. The fact of the matter is, we voted 4-3. I forgot about it. I went home. The neighbors Jim wanted to revisit with the neighbors. There's a debate. Right. So now we're moving forward, right. And I'd like to call the question after this last comment.
Hi, Jim Schneller. I live in St. David's. I pass this property or this block about 3 times weekly. I have for 10 years. I had a few unrepetitive comments. I wanted to point out some basic facts. We're talking about a climate that has 4 seasons. And the trees have no leaves for 1/3 of our year. And so there should be a lot of deference given to the neighbors who perhaps live behind, to the people who drive past on the parallel streets or even the street behind. Second of all, I wanted to point out that Section 8004 of the Municipalities Code, it does have the phrase, architectural features seen from the public way. However, the sentence in front of that phrase points out that the historical commission has full power regarding the general historical and architectural nature of the district. So all this talk about zoning is a little distracting, where the HARB, I think, has done in the past a good job of taking into consideration the whole view. We've got the statute, and they've done what they can. The sentence after the part regarding architectural nature says the design and arrangement of the district. I mean, there's really no way that we can criticize the HARB and say they took too much zoning into consideration. If they want to take into consideration the percent of the lot, they have a right to some extent. And I think the landowner, with all respect, has taken the risk of this kind of maelstrom. The landowner made a lot of negotiations with our community development department, and they took down those final 2 walls. At that point, if they hadn't consulted with an attorney, I'd be very surprised, and they knew that when all the walls came down, this kind of can of worms might open up.
Thank you.
Also, I feel that the matter of demolition warrants more deference on your side, on your part, and it warrants a return to Harb. I hate to say that I would recommend such a thing, but the people do deserve it. And I've noticed from the public comments in the past 3 meetings I've been to that people have shown up with expertise, and they've pointed out that if you just say this building's over 100 years old, then you're also denigrating the meaning of the statute, just like if you said every building's or every detail and cornice is worth consideration. Also, finally, I've noticed that the opponents of, or people who have criticized what's happening, appear to have a high percentage of here when it was enacted. Mr. Donato, in fact, I'm sure you were here when it was enacted.
Just us.
And there was a questionnaire. And despite the fact, I'm sure there were misgivings, that the ordinance was passed. And I also think that new owners who've bought since then are seeing their rights trampled because they've paid a price for their home knowing about that ordinance, whether they believe they should pay more, which I think is more frequently the case, or if they've paid less because they thought, well, I'm going to have troubles in the future. They all bought with knowledge of the ordinance, so no one can say really they're being wronged. The statute is benefiting the township, and I believe you should know that the standard when it comes to talking about a hardship is more of a standard of a taking. I mentioned that the landowner had taken a risk. Well, to my knowledge, it comes down to whether a landowner is losing a use. It doesn't even mean hardship. A landowner can only really object if the actual usage is taken for their property. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call the question.
I have one final comment. No, sorry. I've previously said publicly that I'm in favor of the bump out and the garage as modified. I've said that we have to have Harb look at things again. I think your motion will accomplish that. The certificate of appropriateness is going to be approved tonight with conditions, and the conditions being it goes back to Harb for review and analysis of the need for architectural details. So I think from my standpoint, I'm satisfied that both of my criteria are being fulfilled.
I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? The motion passes 4-3. Okay. All right, Jim, you're still on.
Yes, the next item is in Public Works, Resolution 2012-102, a resolution awarding contract number B12-006 for tree removal and stump grinding from funds allocated in our general services operating account. The resolution would make the award to Jimmy's Tree and Landscaping Contractors for a fixed price of $23,500. And I think, Steve, this covers the next 12 months, or is it the next 24 months?
This is for about 50 specific trees, Commissioner, that have been marked on the Radnor Trail and in different rights-of-ways, and we would hope that they would wrap this project up before the end of the year.
So I will move the passage of this resolution.
Second.
Steve, I have
I'm sorry. Did the second raise their hand? John Nagel? Okay.
Jennifer.
Given the significant difference in their bid versus some of the other ones, do we have any experience? Do we know these guys are qualified? Have we seen any of their work?
They actually were awarded, they were the low bid last year, and I did take into consideration that they are a significant outlier of the project, but they do have to provide performance and payment bonds as part of this work. So if there was a misstep on their part, if they fail to do this work, we have their performance bond to go to, and that insurance company would have to ensure that
Did
that
they
work was
do work
completed.
for us last year?
They actually got this same contract, a similar contract last year.
And were we satisfied with the work?
Yes, their work was adequate.
All right, any other commissioner comment?
Adequate has a very specific.
No, their work was
satisfactory.
It's satisfactory.
Okay,
Yes.
Any other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 6-0 with John Fisher absent.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, is resolution number 2012-103, authorizing the purchase of one replacement truck in the amount of $30,000. This will be done under our state of Pennsylvania contract. Steve, your explanation doesn't describe the make or model of the truck. Shouldn't we have that as part of our?
Basically, Commissioner, at this late stage, there's a limited amount of state contract trucks available. So what we're saying here is we're requesting to buy a replacement pickup truck. It will be less than the $30,000 in the budget. I can't tell you at this point if it's a Chevrolet, a Ford, a Dodge, or a GMC. But if this is approved, we'll speak to the companies that sell the trucks on state contract and get a purchase order wrapped up. That's why it's not specific. It will be a four-wheel drive pickup truck of some fashion.
Okay. I will move the resolution.
Second. So, and we're selling the 1992 that's being replaced?
That will go into the auction pile.
Okay. And I had a question about, under fiscal impact, I noticed for this and the next couple of items, that it says the expense is noted in our capital account as opposed to budgeted. Is there a reason for this?
No, I'm sorry, Commissioner. That's just my poor nomenclature on my fault.
Okay, so these expenses are budgeted for?
Yes,
in those accounts?
Yes, they
okay.
are.
Great.
My mistake.
Any other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0.
The next item is a resolution authorizing the purchase, again, under the state contract, of a trailer valued at $9,100. And I assume, Steve, that the same situation applies here. We don't know at this point the make or model.
Actually, we do have a much better shot at this. This was actually a price quoted by a state bid contractor for this trailer, 9 feet long, 6 feet wide. I apologize for not putting the make in there, but that is an exact number that we will be able to purchase this from one of the vendors.
Or is there a need then to put the make in, model in?
No.
Anybody want that? Okay. I move the introduction or the passage of the resolution.
Second? Who's second?
I'll second.
John
This
Fisher,
is
second.
Resolution 2012-106.
All right, any other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 7-0.
The next item is Resolution 2012-107, which would authorize the purchase of a tar kettle in the amount of $20,400. And I noticed that we currently have a tar kettle that has certainly outlived its useful life and is subjecting some of our employees to kind of risky exposure.
That's correct, Commissioner. It's quite a safety hazard to actually
Are we
light
actually
one.
using it?
Pardon me?
Are we still using it?
No, we have not used it for a while.
All right.
All right, did you make the motion, Jim?
I'll move the resolution, passage of the resolution.
Second.
Second. Commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
The next item is Resolution Number 2012-108, authorizing the making of emergency repairs to 4 refuse trucks in the amount of $18,249. This is explained in an accompanying memorandum from the Director of Public Works with photographs attached of the serious problems with these trucks. So this resolution would allow the township to spend this money to make the necessary repairs. I move the passage of the resolution.
Second, someone?
I'll second it, but I have a question for Steve. Steve, hopefully we're going to put policies and procedures in place so that we can avoid getting into this condition?
Absolutely, Commissioner Nagel. We are in the current position now where we're running into this with various pieces of equipment. At our next meeting, hopefully we'll be requesting some help for our dump trucks. This is not something that just occurred in the last 6 months. This is something that's been going on for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And hopefully with our capital budget and the upcoming budget, you'll see again our requests and our needs and a process to address these and at least fix what we have, even if they're not replaced.
I mean, I know Rick and his guys do a great job, but it seems like this should have been addressed a year ago.
Or maybe 3.
Yeah.
I agree.
Other commissioner comment, public comment? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
That's all I have in Public Works.
All right, finance and audit? John?
First up, I'll move to approve and accept the disbursement summary dated August 20th through September 10th, 2012. And this includes disbursements from Fund 2012-8C, 2012-8D, and 9A. The total amount is $2,164,228.62.
Second, someone?
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment?
Well, I just want to note something. We've moved to this system where the individual vendor list or disbursement list we're now looking at online to look at each of the individual checks that we're writing. And it's been this way for a couple of meetings. And it's a little disconcerting to me that I look at these, when I go and look at the disbursement list, there are just 7 views. So that means, presumably the 7 of us have looked at this, looked at the disbursement list, and nobody else has. So I just want to make a comment that, these are no longer in our packet. They're no longer here to look at. But if residents are interested in what the disbursement lists are, they are online. It's very easy to find under finance. Perhaps nobody has ever looked at them besides the 7 of us, but I think that's probably not true. So, maybe, I don't know why, maybe it's because it's the summer, but nobody's looking at them online. So, I just point that out.
But the point is they're available.
They're there,
and
if you can't find them,
as you can be.
Exactly.
Right?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes up 6-0. Jim Higgins stepped down.
Next up, I'll move to adopt ordinance 2012-13. This is amending Chapter 260 to change mercantile tax filing year from a fiscal year to an annual year. Bill White, any further comment on this?
Let me get a second. Who's going to second this?
Second.
John Nagel. Okay.
We kind of went over this on the introduction last month.
Yeah, to add to the discussion that we had at the last meeting, as well as the question from earlier tonight, in addition to talking with the Wayne Business Association earlier today, we took the opportunity to discuss the change with those customers that came in over the last 2 weeks to pay their mercantile tax as they were due at the end of August. Every person that we spoke to, there were no objections from those taxpayers with regard to the changes in the changing it from the fiscal year to a calendar year. In terms of moving forward with the announcement and rolling out the plan to make sure that the taxpayers are aware of it, in our conversations with the Wayne Business Association this morning, we talked about going to their September meeting that they mentioned earlier tonight, so we'll be there then, as well as there'll be multiple mailings to every single account that we have in our database. There'll be an initial mailing announcing the change. We'll follow that up with obviously, in addition to us being available every day for questions, we'll also hold hearings and question and answer sessions here for taxpayers if there's any questions, and there'll be reminders periodically, as well as when the forms are sent out, the instructions will be amended to show what the new timing is.
So Bill, you actually mail forms to the businesses. They don't pick them offline, or they just...
Yeah, we mail them out.
Okay.
For the most part, they use the ones we mail. There's some that download the form and do it separately.
In the information you have, if they use, if it's XYZ company, but they're using ABC accounting firm to do the work for them, do you have a repository of the accounting firms who file those forms on behalf of the businesses, or is that not something you track?
Yeah, we don't track that. We just track the taxpayers themselves.
So basically, your communication plan is talking to the people who come in, communicate through the Wayne Business Association, and when you mail the forms, there'll be some instructions in there that says, by the way, it's now changed.
And even have some special meetings just for the mercantile taxpayers to come in if they'd like to, if they've got questions. Yes, sir.
Okay. I have no further comments.
All right, any public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0. Raise your hand. You're not voting for the finance? 6-0, Jim Higgins is absent.
Next, I'll move to adopt ordinance 2012-14. This is amending Chapter 260 to combine the business privilege tax mercantile annual license with the annual filing requirement. And this is, Bill, you can comment on this again to try to streamline that process.
On that motion?
Second.
Raise your hand.
Sorry.
Raise your hand. Okay, second.
To make it easier, so in essence, the businesses will file these two returns, and I'm sorry, the license request and the return at the same time.
That's correct. And we're actually going back to the way this practice was done a number of years ago, where the $10 business license was paid for at the same time as the filing. So we're just amending the ordinance to go back to that to make to streamline our processes, which should also help out the taxpayers as well.
Any other commissioner comment, public comment?
If
Bill, you
I
wanna
could
say
just
one-
clarify one thing that was mentioned earlier, just to make sure everybody's aware that there are no changes in the proposed millage rates of either the mercantile or business privilege tax, nor is there a proposed change in the $10 license. That's all staying the same.
And as a township, we don't have the ability to raise the business privilege tax rate.
Yeah, based on amendments to the
set-
state law.
It's based on
That's
state law.
correct.
So even if we want to, we cannot.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 7-0.
As stated before, item M is off the agenda. I'll jump to N, as in Nancy. I'll have Bill White introduce the 2013 minimum municipal obligation.
Thank you. The Board of Commissioners is required to, each year by September 30th, submit to the state the estimated municipal obligation for to be included in the subsequent year's budget to fund the township's share of the pension. What has occurred, at least over the last 2 years, is that we introduced the resolution at the last meeting in September, have a discussion, have it adopted. So some of the feedback we received from the commissioners in years past is getting this information in advance of having to adopt a resolution would be helpful. So for tonight's purposes, I prepared the memo that's in front of you, as well as the draft MMO calculations. I can go through those if you'd like. If not, the other item that is included in the memorandum that was requested is a comparison. If you'll recall, we changed some of the assumptions with regard to the asset growth year over year. For years, the assumption had been 8%. Based on what has occurred in the market over the last decade, that number seems a little high. So we adjusted it down to 7.5%.
What have we gotten over the last 10 years on a compound annual growth rate, Bill?
Bear with me 1 second. I have that information.
That's very good.
The information as it's reported from PFM, the 7-year growth for both the police and the civilian has been 4.45%. You go back to the since inception, when the township first started or switched over to PFM, the police has been 6.25%, and the non-uniform or the civilian plan has been 6.06%. So moving off of the 8% is definitely a move in the right direction. What you can see on the memorandum is we had asked Mock and Hop Benefits Group, who prepares the actuary reports, what would the numbers look like had we dropped it all the way to a 4.5% asset growth assumption, And that's what's included at the bottom of the memorandum. As you can see, the MMO calculations as proposed is just shy of $3.5 million. With the interest rate assumption dropped down to 4.5%, that number balloons up to $7.7 million. The other impact is, as we've been discussing over the last year or so, the unfunded liability that is on our statement of net assets would grow from 22 million up to 47. So that's the impact of the interest rate assumption. That's the sensitivity between those two in terms of the adjustment in the rate today and what that means in our annual MMO, as well as the unfunded liability.
I took a little time to think about that when I saw your numbers at 4.5%, because those were shocking numbers. And also because we do have some residents who have kind of consistently and vociferously argued that it should be lower than 7.5%. So I took a look back, just did some research on historic rates of return from the stock market. And actually the last 10 years, 2000 to 2010, were the worst in history, and they were 4.5, which is exactly what we got, 4.45. But the last 20-year average is 9.4%, the last 25 years average is 10.5%, and the 2011 average is a little bit over 8%. So looking forward and planning into the future, unless we truly believe that the worst decade of history will be repeated in the next decade, I think it's completely reasonable to hover around 7.5%, given those historic numbers. I think it would be mistakenly cautious to bring it down to 4.5. It would be irresponsible. I think we'd be overfunding to the detriment of today's taxpayers. So I have reached a comfort level with 7.5. I know there are residents that are, throwing off their couch cushions right now hearing that, but I having done a little bit
When
of...
you raise taxes 34%, what they do, the whole couch will go.
Bill, what's inception? You said 6.25 and 6.06 since inception. What's the date of inception?
I apologize. That's a good question. January 1st, 1996.
So 1996.
So I agree with Elaine's comments, but I'll caution that some of the investments in the pension fund may be lower risk, lower rate of return than the equities market as you portrayed it. But at the same time, it's certainly, the rate of return should be much greater than 4%. And maybe less than the original 8%. What I would suggest we do is take a long-term approach to this, and I think, Bill, you're taking us in the right direction, like you said, that we try to move toward a rate of return that is equivalent to the trailing 20-year rate, so that we are in fact tracking the 20-year rate of return that we're actually getting. Because then that way we in fact align the MMO contribution to our circumstance, not the stock market, so if you take us in that direction, and it will ultimately raise the MMO contributions that we have to make, but at the same time it will move us in the direction of proper funding. So I appreciate that.
Does PFM have 20-year data and 25-year data? It's simply they're giving us our data since they took over in 1996. I would think they may have.
I can certainly request it. I just asked the performance of our funds.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have what I would personally like to see, and I don't know how difficult it is, and I'm not locked into this, but the return by year for 25 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the return on average for the last 5, the last 10, the last 20, and then the compounded annual growth rate from 5, 10, 20, just so I get a flavor, just based on what I've heard, 4.5 seems maybe a little bit too conservative. 7.5 still seems a little bit, perhaps, optimistic.
Kevin, have you ever an opportunity to look at the pension reports that we get that typically, it's just the president and vice president of the board that go to those meetings. You might find them interesting, because a lot of the stuff you're asking about is in there.
Okay. If it's in there, just
Get you a copy of
It's a
this.
PDF.
send it to me.
It is. The information they provide in those reports is just since they took over our accounts.
Right.
To go beyond that, we can ask, and what they'll do is probably pull similar pension plans that they've had over that period.
That's what I
but-
like. I mean,
And in 3 years, we'll have 20-year data, so,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, and the other, in terms of the long-term approach, we update our actuarial assumptions every 2 years. So this is the interest rate, and keep in mind too, the interest rate assumption on the assets is only one component of a list of many that go into managing the program. But every 2 years, those list of assumptions, we'll have the opportunity to evaluate those. If we find, the market's moving in a certain direction, we can certainly adjust accordingly at those times as well. So,
Bill, what is it that you need from us tonight? Do you need a number on this so that you can proceed with?
no, sir. Just for tonight, it was just presenting the information. What'll happen is at the September 24th meeting, once we've nailed down the budget estimates on payroll for 13, we will finalize this and put it in resolution form for your consideration at that meeting.
So you will pick a number between now and the 24th that assembles all the data and is what you believe to be the best?
Yes, and at this point, I
Assumption.
don't anticipate any significant change off of what's in this memo. The 2013 payroll estimates are pretty well known at this point. There might be some changes as we go through the budget process, but materially, these will be close to the 3.5 million here.
But the assumption of choosing between 7.5 and 4.5 or something in between is huge. So are you going to make that choice and make a recommendation to us on the 24th?
Yeah, the recommendation is going to be to hold to the 7.5%. That's what we told Mock and Hop to run the actuarial update on. If the board wants to move off of that percentage, at this point, we'd ask Mock and Hop to go back and redo their actuarial update.
is it, and I'm just doing this off the top of my head, it just happens that 6 is dead center between 4.5 and 7.5. Am I able to split the difference in between both of those? So 7 less 3.5 is.
Well, how much is it going to cost you to split the
I
difference? Where are you
understand.
going to
I
get
just
the
wanna
money?
understand. Yeah, I just want to
Tell me
understand.
we're getting the money.
I'm
That's
not-
what I want to
yeah,
see.
I understand. I understand that, Bill. I just want to understand the consequences.
What I think, Mr. Chairman, if you do, that number's going to go up, which means the board then, by making that decision, will automatically build in a tax increase to the residents
Right,
accordingly, make up the
yeah,
difference.
I
So-
understand exact consequences of what's
Well,
going on.
I think maybe what we're looking for is Don's comment, is the board want us to do that, move to 6 and get a consensus, because if not, then a reciprocal will be then the appropriate tax increase to be able to raise, to
Yeah,
generate
I
that
get it,
additional-
but I just want to understand if it's 6.
Is that
Is it?
I'm comfortable with 7.5.
Is it 2-1? And is it the dead center between 22 and 47? And if you don't know that,
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to ask Mock and Hop to run that.
do we have to tell you tonight, give you that direction on a percentage tonight if we wanted to change it?
Yeah, because you're going to have to rerun some
Well,
numbers.
I'd like to get a consensus from the board. We'll need to do that.
7.5%, raise your hand.
Move forward to that.
Majority rules. Okay, thank you.
We can ease into a lower rate of return, but I
Yeah.
think it'd be fiscally irresponsible to do any more than that. We're
Right.
already struggling to balance our books now, so.
Mr. Chairman, I think I agree with what Commissioner Fisher said, and I think this is something I think maybe goes back to Kevin, your point previously, is to start moving it slowly, incrementally towards that, instead of making one radical move there, because you can just see what
right,
that
and,
radical move.
we've had some discussions, Bob, about other
Sure.
things that may provide opportunity. So
Exactly.
I'm not opposed to doing it, but I also want our future assumptions to be realistic. I'm not sure what realistic is at this point in time.
Yes.
And I think we're in agreement with
Still,
that.
7.5 represents a change from the last time this was done, correct?
Right,
Last
which
time
was
it
at 8%.
It was at 8%.
Which, when you look at the numbers, you could see the jump in the MMO from 12 to 13.
Yep.
And that's one of the major contributing factors. And then one other note with the MMO and what's presented on the 24th is that while that's due at the end of September, that does not lock us in. If there are other significant or material changes to the budget numbers in terms of payroll from September till it's adopted, we can always amend the MMO and send that in by the end of December. So the adoption at the next meeting will satisfy our requirement for state law there, but doesn't lock us in necessarily.
Okay, no further report on the
And this is all
finance.
based on, Bob, sort of an assumption of status quo on these benefits, correct?
That'd be correct.
All right, Parks and Recreation.
Before I start into the motions, just want to mention that the fall brochure is now available online, and 3 fun events coming up. The first is the Fall Harvest and Great Pumpkin Patch event, which is Sunday, October 7th. Next is Trick or Treat at the Township Building on Friday, October 26th. And there's a mystery dinner, theater, and masquerade on Saturday, October 27th. First is item O. I would move that we authorize to receive bids for the Radnor Youth basketball apparel for the 2012-13 program.
Second.
Any commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
PQ and R are all similar. That's because of our charter issue with the minimum bid. That's why they're here. So I would like to lump the 3 of those together. It's authorizing for the tennis program, for Science Explorers, and for World Cup Sports Academy. So I'd move that we approve Resolution 2012-99, 2012-100, and 2012-101.
Second.
Commissioner comment? Public comment? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0.
That's all for Parks
Can
and
I
Rec.
just also thank Tammy Cohen and staff? If you haven't gotten a chance to take advantage of the discount tickets that Parks and Rec is offering, I believe it's Dorney Tickets, Hershey Park, and the PA Renaissance Fair. There may be others.
We do. We have actually movie tickets available as well. The Baltimore Aquarium, of course, and then, of course, upcoming, if we get snow, ski tickets. So that's available for all the residents, and they can check that out at the website, of course, radnorrecreation.com.
Thank you. And great discounts, by the way. Thanks.
Personnel Administration.
First and only item on the agenda is Resolution 2012-109, approval of the Philadelphia Area School Business Officers Association renewal lease agreement. Just a couple of questions, Bob. Is it at same rate or an increase?
That's correct. It is at the same rate.
And have we ever, I personally have never heard anything from the commercial property owners or anybody in questioning this. So have you or anybody, has anybody else heard anything? It's been dead silent to me.
No, I have not. And as part of this is, when it began 2 years ago, when I started, I know the board, one of their directions is to look for the vacant space that we have in this building and try to find some useful space. And here is, a very good tenant. 3 people are here. I know when they have meetings and that, very little impact to this building. It generates approximately $42,000 a year for the township for approximately 1,500 square feet.
It's a not-for-profit organization as well.
That's correct.
So I make the motion to approve.
Second. Wait a second.
I don't know if anybody saw it, but they had a big article about them in the Philadelphia Inquirer business section. Did anybody see this? They managed to keep health care increases down to 1.1% for the next couple of years for all of their members. And they were getting all kinds of kudos from the business community for it, and, how did you do it and whatnot. So maybe we could take some tips from them.
Any public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
No report under public safety.
Library?
No report.
And no report under public health.
Library? Nothing?
No.
Old business? New business?
I want to announce a meeting on Wednesday, September 12th. That's this coming Wednesday, 5:30 in the Powys Conference Room, which is right next to this main room. The Open Space Committee is having a meeting.
Okay. Public comment, participation?
Hi, my name's Annie Hirschler. I live on West Peachtree Lane. Jim Higgins is my commissioner. We've never met. I really just wanted to, I heard a rumor, it started about our North Wayne Park possibly being used as a water basin, and I know that that's been tabled for 2 weeks from now, and I'll definitely be showing up for that. But in knowing that we could be losing that park, it's obviously upsetting. Didn't know that it was going to be happening, and also realized that there is a study being undertaken, but I'm just not understanding why it needed to be undertaken when it seems like the same exact engineering firm did an evaluation just a year ago. So I just was hoping somebody could help me understand what we're trying to achieve. And I understand it's flooding, but I just wasn't sure.
It's not the entire park.
No. Well, first of all,
Yeah, that's what I'm just hoping to understand.
I know there are a lot of rumors floating around, and I get emails on this, and I've answered them all. Mr. Norsini has gotten some. Mr. Zinkowski has gotten some. There is no plan now to convert that field into a holding basin for stormwater. A lot of things have to happen for that to occur, and I don't think any member of this board has an opinion on it yet. I don't. The point is that this Chagrin Valley Engineering of Chagrin Falls, Ohio, did a study in July of 2011 of the entire township and its problems with stormwater, aging infrastructure, and other matters. This particular study that we're going to entertain on the 24th of this month at our next meeting, regular meeting, is simply a supplement to that July 2011 study. It's a more concentrated study, and it came and is focused at North Wayne Park because we've had some very, very serious problems of property damage on Poplar Avenue, Woodland, Plant, Pennsylvania. And so it was logical for Chagrin Valley Engineering to look in this part of our township first as a supplement to the broader study and less detailed study that they made in July of 2011.
Okay, so, and I can speak again, in a couple weeks, but when I looked at, and, I do have a copy of that report from last year, and it says, there's recommendations, let's say 1, 2, 3. And the second recommendation was to actually fix the North Wayne Field pump, lack of a better word. And I just, when you mentioned that it's a supplement, is it just more urgent? And that's why it's being looked at in more detail?
Well, we had a very bad experience on May 15th, 16th, midnight to 2 a.m. The basin at the south end of the field, that's been there since before Hurricane Floyd, I believe, did not function properly. We had an enormous amount of water come down in a very short period of time. Right. And Mr. Norsini can fill in the particulars, but it's undersized for a storm of that type. It's even undersized for much smaller storms. Secondly, it failed because it's chronically subject to clogging and not handling the water properly. So we looked at the idea of improving that particular holding basin, that cistern. And I believe, now Steve can take over at this point, but I believe that the thinking was that instead of spending money to upgrade that particular holding tank, we would just look at, but not decide on, a bigger fix to the problem. Is it going to be at North Wayne Field? I don't know. That's yet to be determined.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to add on to that, I'll take full responsibility of why that discussion's taking place right now. As part of that, when that system blew out and failed at the North Wayne Field, looking at trying to repair or replace that for approximately up to $90,000, I felt it was a complete waste of money to be able to go back into a system that really has failed and cannot adequately handle that water flow through that area. So going back to the study that Chagrin Valley had presented to the township, and also to the belief that we can't stop, we have to stop Band-Aiding problems and start solving problems. And one of the options to look at is to store more water in open areas, open spaces of the township. So that's why this first initial shot out of the box would be is looking at trying to create a large detention type system at North Wayne Field, which is an open space area. This is the first plan out of the box here. I'm sure that there will be much conversation. It'll be the first opportunity for the board to take a look at this. However, as part of this, we have to look at all the different open space areas we have, Because short of that, that means starting to acquire real estate and properties to be able to do this. And when you have issues of unmanaged stormwater or just a lot of issues here, and trying to spend our dollars appropriately and make sure that when we fix an issue, we're done, we move on. So as part of that, this is the initial discussion that's starting to take place. Because I know, just as you have probably heard, and I know Commissioner Higgins has heard, to where the system's being built tomorrow and all these types of things, there's a process. And the biggest probably stumbling block to this, the finance director confirmed this, some initial estimates here are over $1 million, which the township doesn't even have. So, I mean, it's these types of things that we have to look at of trying to build and develop this. So there will be some considerable dialogue and discussion that will take place, but there has to be a point in which we begin, and that's one of the things that I asked our Public Works Director in Chagrin Valley is look at starting to put plans together of what is this going to look like. So this is our initial plan out of the box here to be able to look at this.
Well, I just wanted to point out that in that report from last year, recommendation number 2 says, for an estimate of $225,000, not $1 million. And don't get me wrong, I know it's baby steps, but that we should clear out the debris. Start with those things that are very, they wouldn't cost a lot, and fix the one that's there now. See if that works even, and even expand the one that's there now. And I think it even noted that where it's placed is not, it was never designed, it was designed right, but it wasn't installed correctly because of, some constraints that the park had. So I would just really, I'll definitely be involved with the process, but it frightens me that any part of a park would be removed from public use. Really affects our community. Okay, thank you. Anything to add?
Thank you.
Mr.?
No,
The commissioners did a very good job, and the manager.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patrick Harper. I live in the North Wayne community as well. And my only question, follow-up to that park, I know it's been tabled to the 24th, but you mentioned that there was the supplemental study with those recommendations or the estimates of over $1 million. Do we have any kind of documentation or anything that we can look at ahead of that meeting? Or where did that recommendation come from? Because the Chagrin study just recommended to fix it. So I didn't know if there was another report that we didn't have access to, or if there's something out there where we can, where there was a recommendation to make it bigger or to authorize that?
Mr. Chairman, that's what I've asked them to do, because based on the damage that was done from that storm there back in May, and the opportunity to make corrections, which the board did allot $200,000 to look at this. It was my decision to look bigger at this picture than spending that money just to do that short repair. So that is what they are preparing right now. So that's what you'll see presented coming shortly with their options and what's being looked at right now. So this is the beginning of this process of looking at that. Okay. And that responsibility lies on me because, again, for part of that issue that affects North Wayne, there's a percentage of that water, and I think with our Public Works Director working with Chagrin of determining of what volume comes out of that North Wayne Park area that overspills that, as well as looking up and above that, which is the AT&T lot and also some Pico property as well, but then also looking at the volume that comes from the north as well and the volume that comes from there. So I think a lot of that is what Chagrin's going to be looking at, is what is that impact going to look like? And are we going to capture, if we build a basin that big and spend that much money, if it's only going to capture 20% of that water and you still have 80% still impacting that neighborhood, then it's really not the appropriate use of those dollars. So I think this is a process of starting to focus on what we're looking at as well. So that is what the in process is being done here. So you'll see that daylighted here shortly.
So on the 24th is when they're sharing that supplemental?
That's correct. That'll be, and if it comes out sooner than that, we'll make sure we get up on the website and let you know then too, and be able to put something out.
And is that supplemental study just looking at North Wayne or looking at the whole problems for the Gulf Creek?
I think right now is the focus is on the North Wayne area, but we have multiple areas throughout the township. So I think this gives us a start to be able to begin this process. And then as part of this study currently, which is being done now, is a stormwater utility study, which is looking at the entire township and watersheds and impacts to what has to be done to resolve this issue, because So it's all, there's a concurrent running stormwater utility study that's being done as well as the Chagrin Valley study, and now looking at this particular area. So there's multiple pieces that are in play.
Okay.
But those are all good questions, though, that both of you has brought up.
Yeah, I guess we were just reviewing this, and we didn't see any recommendations to make it bigger, so we wanted to kind of find out where that came from, where that originated from, and more details on that.
Sure. And that's what will be coming.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? Motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 7-0. Thank you all.